minute. Just waiting on some technical magic.
Just test. Andrew, can you hear me over Zoom?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you so much.
I can also hear you.
Okay, I call to order the 2/12/25 5 o'clock workshop. And tonight we have a presentation on our urban growth boundary update from our community development director, Scott Woodford. Take it away, Scott.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Evening, Council. Name is Scott Woodford, Community Development Director, and welcome to the public who is here to hear in on this workshop, as well as those who may be attending on Zoom. This is the fourth meeting that series of meetings we've had on the Urban Growth Boundary Amendment. As you'll recall, we have an Urban Growth Boundary Steering Committee that we utilize to work a lot of these issues through initially. And then we review everything with the city's planning commission, and then finally with the council on each step of the process. And so this is, we've had our steering committee meeting and our planning commission meeting for this round, and the planning commission is kind of the last step on this particular step of the process. And so we also have on the call today Matt Hasty and Andrew Parrish from MIG, our consultants that are helping us out with this process. And so we have a presentation for you tonight, and the agenda basically, what we'd like to cover with you all tonight is to do a summary of the feedback we received through the open house, both the online open house and the in-person open house that we did back in December. We've tallied all those comments and summarized them, so we'll go over those with you because that helps inform this process. We'll have then a time for public comment in the workshop so that the public can address the council. And I just wanted to note that that just for the public's sake, that there's been some comments we've received about a rezoning application for Mackenzie Meadows, and just wanted to note that this is not the forum necessarily, well, not necessarily, it's not the forum for debating the merits of that project. It's a county, Deschutes County process, and if you have comments, those comments should be directed to the county planners. If you have any questions on who to contact, I'd be happy to help you out. But the purpose of tonight was just to get an update on the rezone and how it may impact, how it could or could not impact our UGB amendment process. That's the point of that update relative to that. And then we'll go through our presentation on the draft alternatives analysis, which basically takes all the 5 alternatives that we've put forth so far and review the scoring that we've applied to all those alternatives based on community feedback, based on the 4 factors that we're required to review them against from the state of Oregon rules. And then we'll finish with a presentation on conversations we had with the local district forest ranger, Ian Reed, about potential or what the options are for utilizing Forest Service land relative to urban growth boundary expansions, and then also a discussion we had with the Oregon Department of Aviation about things that we should keep in mind and consider as we consider development in and around an airport. So we'll finish up with that. So, yes, sir.
Like to make a point of order for the public. If you want to talk about the rezoning process for Mackenzie Meadows, we have an open period in the regular city council meeting for public comment on any topic, as long as it's not on our agenda. And that is not on our agenda tonight in the regular city council meeting. So if you want to make comment to the public, a public comment to the city council, you're more than welcome to do so at the 6:30 meeting. And the public comments are right at the beginning. So I just wanted to say that out loud, just so people didn't think we didn't want to hear you or anything like that. Thanks.
Thank you. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt Hasty and Andrew Parrish to give us an update on where we are in the process and start those agenda items. So Matt and Andrew, I'm not sure who's going to take it from here. Can
All
you
right,
guys hear
thank
me?
you,
Yeah,
Scott.
sure,
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah, just took me a sec to unmute. We're gonna kind of tag team this, and I'm gonna do the very first part, just kind of where we are in the process, and then Andrew will talk about the open house and online survey process, and then after the public comment, we'll similarly kind of tag team that as well. So, yeah. In terms of just where we are in the process, we've kind of talked about this already a little bit, but we have gotten to the point of creating and evaluating a set of alternatives and getting community feedback on those, talking to the steering committee and the planning commission about those, and now talking to the council tonight about those. And our next step will be to work on a preferred alternative, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward in the presentation here. So take it away, Andrew.
All right, thank you, Matt. Just in terms of the things that we've been up to since we last spoke to City Council, we had a large open house in December about a variety of urban growth boundary alternatives. I think that was attended by over 200 people. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We had an online version of that open house, and we'll talk a little bit more about the comments we received there. We had discussions with, as Scott mentioned, state and federal regulators about some sites in the study area. The city has received a lot of public letters and correspondence on this topic, and we've been talking about how to put those online in a way that more folks can kind of see. There has been a rezone application for a property that's currently in the county that we'll talk about a bit tonight, and we've developed a draft alternatives analysis report, which is going to eventually be the findings, the kind of factual base for the city's urban growth boundary decision. So we want to make sure that you are comfortable with the way that we're going about that analysis. And then with the same set of materials that we're talking about with you today, we met with the steering committee at the end of January and planning commission earlier last week, so that we can provide their feedback to you as part of this this meeting. Just to summarize what the December 9th open house was and the results that we got from it and what we're going to do with that information. So again, we had over 200 participants. It was a really well attended meeting. We had a lot of good conversations with people kind of as a broader group, and then we went into smaller group discussions, and I think a number, if not all of you, were probably at that meeting to talk in detail about some of the alternatives that we were presenting. The themes that we heard, folks want to prioritize vacant property and land near the urban growth boundary. They want to avoid anything that looks like sprawl. They want to prioritize land that can be served with city facilities and infrastructure in an efficient way. They want to prioritize the beautiful views that they love, and maintaining kind of lower densities, focusing on housing affordability and livability. Those were all themes that we heard during that meeting. On December 9th, the same day that we had that meeting, we launched an online open house. We had about 390 people who filled out at least one answer in the open house. People might have just kind of popped in and answered a few questions and left. So it's kind of hard to get a count of total participation there, but we had a pretty even split of people saying that they lived in Sister City limits and lived outside the city. There were a lot of participants who owned property in the study area we're looking at. About a third said that they work in Sisters, and 90% of respondents said that they own their home. We asked questions about the alternatives that we presented, the various alternatives in Priority 1 land for an urban growth boundary expansion. And we heard a lot more support for Alternative 1 and Alternative 5. This chart shows kind of in green the answers that we received that were either we have a very good opinion of this alternative, good, or neutral. And so you'll see that Alternatives 1 and Alternative 5 performed the best here. There was not a lot of support for Alternatives 2, 3, and 4, which is not surprising. given what they were. We also asked about the specific state of Oregon Goal 14 criteria, um, which we related to kind of a variety of topics. This chart shows alternative 1 in blue and alternative 5 in green, and those kind of across the board performed much better in people's opinions. And we were asking about things like, how efficiently does this alternative use land, or what are the opportunities for preserving natural resources in this alternative? How well does this one avoid natural hazards, et cetera, related to those state of Oregon Goal 14 criteria. We allowed folks to provide open-ended answers to questions. They said things like, we need to focus on affordable housing and workforce housing. We have concerns about development near the airport. Folks said that the city doesn't need to grow at all, that we should be protecting wildlife corridors and natural resources. Some folks said that they support the process and what the city's been up to and appreciate kind of the openness that they've been doing this process in so far. Again, alternatives 1 and alternatives 5 were the most popular. There was some mention of the Mackenzie Meadows Village property that we'll be talking about. And kind of the city should continue to focus on infill development as well. So I think at this point, we said we would pause and take public comment. Unless there's any questions about the open houses that I can help answer for council.
Yeah, are there any questions or comments about the open house summaries that anybody has? Doesn't look like it. So I think the next step in our agenda is to hear some comments from the public. We had on the agenda about 15 minutes. I would defer to the mayor just how much extra time that might allot to that. If there's more comment than we have allotted. But I guess I would throw it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Yeah, and just to reiterate what Councilor Frieden said earlier, the Mackenzie Meadows rezoning is very much a county decision right now, and also it's best that we try to stay at arm's length from it, because if it does, come into consideration, then, we have to be kind of a neutral board, keep the process as clean as possible. But you're welcome to talk about that at our 6:30 meeting. But this is just specifically about this process so far. So I know a few people kind of wrote down things, but I'll call your name, and if you want to hold your comments till later, then please let me know. I have Bill Willits. Okay. And we'd like to keep the comments to about 3 minutes or less if possible.
My name is Bill Willits, 68621 East Highway 20, Sisters, Oregon. And I'm here to discuss the current report that was published in December of 2024, largely by DLCD. And either fortunately or unfortunately, the numbers that they've come up with is a little bit different than the numbers we're using. They're saying Sisters, Oregon needs 1,791 new homes. They're saying 645 of those homes should be affordable. They're saying 437 of those homes should be median income workforce houses, and then 710 homes should be market rate housing. We as a community are struggling to try to get to 30% affordable and workforce. What DLCD is suggesting to our community, we need 60%. So I wanted to make everyone aware of that. I wanted to put it in the public record and then hand out this to each of our council members. Just everybody to own one. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Sandusky, am I saying that right? If it's about Mackenzie Meadows, then I would prefer that it would be at 6:30. Yes, yes. Yeah, no, let's wait until then. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Heidi Dixon, same, okay. And Avery McChristian,
Hello,
hi.
Christian. It might be something that is a step further than we are at this point, but I'm kind of curious what data and information gets gathered to evaluate the natural resource impacts and ecological impacts of urban growth boundary expansion. So when that point comes up where we're looking at the different options, what information are they going to be utilizing to evaluate that impact? It's a question I had, but I think.
Thank you. And then,
I'd like to give people over Zoom an opportunity. I know one person has already written in requesting to speak about the urban growth boundary. So I'm going to call on that person first. And if anyone else is attending over Zoom who would like to provide comments specifically about the subject at hand right now, you can also use the raised hand button on Zoom. But I'm going to start with Deb Flagan.
Mayor Lutz, can you hear me?
yes,
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Lutz and members of the council. My name is Deborah Flagan and I'm Vice President with Hayden Homes. Hayden Homes has been building in the City of Sisters proudly since 2007. And our first community was the village at Cold Springs. And most recently, we have built the Mackenzie Meadows Village. To date, we've built just over 450 homes in the City of Sisters. In addition, we have our nonprofit, which is called First Story, and we provided homeownership opportunities to 9 families. These families earn less than 80% of the area median income, and we were able to, they were able to purchase these homes with a 0 down, 0 interest, 30-year mortgage. I'm here tonight to ask the Sisters City Council formally to request the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners to expedite the review of the pending Mackenzie Meadows Village zoning application, which echoed the UGB Steering Committee's unanimous recommendations on January 30th. Mayor Letts, can I continue with this information, or do you want me to share this at the council meeting? I think it pertains to what you're talking about right now as this workshop.
I'm looking at you guys. I mean, because I know we will discuss this evening, correct?
Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
the distinction is, if someone has comments about the merits of the application or asking the council to oppose or weigh in on the actual rezone application, that should wait until the 6:30 opportunity. The council during this workshop is looking at a couple different options that the steering committee and planning commission were asked to weigh in on about the timing of this and the impacts it has on our process. So I think if it pertains to that, that's probably fine.
Thank you, Jordan. To state clearly, Hayden Homes nor Mackenzie Meadows Village LLC owners wish to unnecessarily delay the city's UGB process. The City of Sisters has been intentional in their work for more than over 4 years, and we support the city's vision for the UGB expansion. This request is purely to provide the City of Sisters a definitive understanding of additional priority 1 lands that should be considered when expanding the UGB. As city staff and the MIG consultants have shared publicly, the Mackenzie Meadows Village property compares favorably to many of the current priority 1 sites. Alternatively, Mackenzie Meadows Village consists of 58 acres. It's owned by 1 single owner, the LLC. It's immediately adjacent to the current Sisters UGB and existing city infrastructure. It's walkable to existing schools, businesses, amenities, and public spaces. There are no restrictive CCNRs on this property, and the owner has been forthcoming in their interest to develop both workforce and affordable housing at scale on this site. In conclusion, I ask council tonight to direct a formal request to the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners for an expedited review of the McKenzie Meadows Village LLC rezone application so that the property can be included for consideration in the current Sisters UGB expansion process. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I see that there are a few other people attending over Zoom. If you'd like to provide comments right now that are specific to the urban growth boundary presentation, please use the raised hand button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else over Zoom. I did get another form. This might be a 6:30.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is 6:30 topic, so we'll wait for that. Okay, I think that is all the public comment.
We'll move to the next phase of our presentation where we'll give a little bit of an overview of what the the questions are that we are posing in front of you relative to the process and how this rezone proposal may impact the process. We got some feedback from the steering committee and the planning commission on this, but we're really looking for a direction from council on what to do with it. So we've got some slides prepared here that Matt or Andrew will kind of review what the issue is, and then frame the questions.
All right, and I'll cover these slides. So some of this will be a little bit of a repeat of what you've heard before, but as you know, there is a request in to rezone this property from forest F2 to mixed use agriculture, and the purpose of that, we understand, is to be able to evaluate those lands as priority lands, priority one lands, excuse me, as part of this UGB process that we're involved in. This is, as Scott said, and others have said, it's a county zoning process, requires consistency or compliance with county criteria for zone changes to be approved. The process has been initiated. We don't know how long this process will take. We have heard from, I think, county staff and estimated that it, could likely be 5 to 9 months or more even. That's without appeals. If the decision were appealed, that would potentially add more time, whether it was, and it could be appealed, whether it's approved or not approved. I think at the point where the decision is issued, there'd be another sort of potentially decision about how to consider this or think about this. But yeah, next slide. If, and this was noted by one of the public commenters, but we have looked at how different properties kind of stack up against those criteria that Andrew mentioned earlier and that we'll talk about in more detail in a little bit within the study area, the larger study area. And so we do know that this property would, if it were compared to other priority one land or to existing priority one land in the area, it would score well in comparison to many of the other existing priority one lands against the criteria that we need to look at. Again, sort of the schedule implications for the UGB process are uncertain, but if we were to want to wait for this rezoning application to move its way through the process, it could add some time to the process. There are some things we could be doing during that time, so it's not like it would add all that time. There's definitely progress we could be making during that time, but it would certainly add time to the process. And just, to be clear, we can't recommend a UGB expansion that includes or assesses this property against other priority one land until the rezone has been approved. So we can't just sort of right now say, oh, well, it looks great, and so, here's how it stacks up. And we recommend including it. So we've got a couple of options. We presented these options to our steering committee and to the planning commission. We actually two basic options and then kind of a variation and then a little bit of a variation on the variation, I'll say. So option A is just kind of keep going. As we have been, stay on the schedule we've currently that we originally set using the priority one lands that we've discussed to date and that Andrew's going to talk more about in a moment. So that's one, or that's option A. Option B is wait for the county rezone decision until we recommend a specific preferred alternative pending the outcome of that decision. And if the outcome is positive, again, we can potentially consider this as priority one land. Option B2 says, let's look at a couple of potential preferred alternative options. One would be assuming that that rezone did go through and we could consider that as priority one land. And the other would be assume the rezone is not successful and we cannot and wouldn't look at it as priority one land. And then kind of the additional option or recommendation possibly with B2 is to put a time limit on that. Put a time limit or sort of a trigger or threshold on that. So it's either say, well, we'll do that, but we won't wait more than a certain amount of time, or we won't wait, we'll say, hey, we'll wait until the county issues a decision and then we'll decide how to move forward. Or again, you could put a specific time limit on it. So I'll say, I think that I'm trying to remember if the next slide has the steering committee recommendation. Yes. So the steering committee recommended that we do kind of move forward with that option B2. They were interested in putting a time limit on that kind of pause on the process. And when we talked to the planning commission, they made a similar recommendation. They were in favor, I will say, of a relatively tight time limit. They talked about, I would say, generally around 6 months. Now, we don't know if that's going to be enough time for the county to make a decision or not, but that was the discussion that the planning commission had. And some people said, hey, maybe an even shorter time limit. At least one person said possibly a longer time limit, but they kind of it kind of was around that 6-month period. So that's what we've heard on this issue from the steering committee and the planning commission to date. And so we are hoping you will make some kind of recommendation for us. Again, there are some things we can be doing to move forward. One is to look at those two potential preferred alternatives. And so that's going to take us some time to come up with those regardless. There's some other work we can be doing in terms of thinking about the subsequent planning for whatever area comes into the UGB or is recommended to come into the UGB. We're anticipating to do more of that after the adoption of a UGB decision, but we can start to kind of establish the framework for that planning process now and kind of use some of that time efficiently. So I just wanted to note that this pause doesn't have to be a total kind of pencils down in the architect language, I guess, sort of approach. It could include some work while we're waiting for this decision to move forward. So I'll stop talking. I'll see if Scott or Andrew have anything to add to that, and then want to hear from y'all about this issue.
Andrew, did you have anything, excuse me, to add to that?
No, nothing to add.
Okay. Yeah, I think Matt framed the question fairly well. And I would just add to it that I talked to the county planners and they are going to be reviewing this expeditiously. They did not see any value to sending an expedited letter. In other words, they didn't think it would really shave off much time at all. They said unless competing interests come up, where they're directed to do some other things that might extend that time frame, then at that point they would suggest that maybe the city send a letter if so inclined. But at least initially, it was their opinion that it would not shave off much time at all. their their estimates are that a kind of an updated estimate is that it could take 9 months plus, and I think that's potentially 9 months in case it gets appealed. And at least one entity we know of has stated that they plan to oppose this. So there's we don't know that for sure until the end of the process, but there's a reasonable chance that they could get appealed either way. So just wanted to add that to the mix and see what questions you guys have for us.
I think one question I have, as we debate these AB, B2s, et cetera, is at what point, and this is probably as much for folks up there on the other side of the world, can we pivot? In other words, I'm not real interested in kicking this can 12 months down the road. I don't think that's in anybody's benefit. But how far into the process can we go, assuming that the county takes longer than we think, before we have to pivot and say, okay, missed opportunity, or okay, there's an opportunity, so that we have some sense of what we should be thinking as we move forward. Do you have a sense on that?
Matt, do you want to take that one on?
I think you could essentially pivot at any time. I mean, I think that I'll just give you kind of my opinions about this, and in terms of the timing, I think that if you want to put some kind of pause or wait for this process to move forward, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to set a timeline that's not long enough to allow at least the the decision by the hearings officer and the board to take place, right? Because otherwise we've just kind of waited and we don't have any kind of outcome. But I think you could sort of set some triggering mechanisms, and one would be, okay, we're going to wait until that decision is rendered, and then we're either going to move forward and consider this as priority one land, or and if it's not appealed, or if it's appealed, we're going to pivot and we're just going to kind of keep moving forward. We're not going to consider this. I mean, I think that would be another sort of decision point for you. And then beyond that, I mean, it's really, I'm not the guy that should tell you how long to wait, but I'm not sure what the other pivot points would be. They would be kind of the resolution of an appeal would be another potential pivot point. Yeah, those would really, I think, probably be the pivot point, sort of the initial decision by the county, and then a potential whether or not an appeal is filed, and then the resolution of the appeal. Those seem to me like they're sort of logical, I guess, pivot points. And I think it would be not unreasonable to set sort of a deadline for, at least like that second or third pivot point, so that you're not just waiting indefinitely, which I don't think would, serve the community well. So those are just my opinions.
If I may interrupt you, I think I was also thinking, I don't want to slow the process down. So you mentioned work could still continue if we decide we want to take B2 and drag our feet a little bit. How far down the road are we realistically putting ourselves if A, it doesn't go through, or B, it goes through and it goes to appeal and we decide that we don't want to wait? In other words, I feel like we're making good progress on a decision as a community based on the information that's been presented to this point. And I want to be sure that as we consider this other opportunity, that we don't drag ourselves out so far that we're looking at another 2 years before we have a decision and something that goes out to the state and gets approved by the state, so we can start moving forward on things that we need to move forward on, housing.
Yeah, so I'll just say that in terms of that next step coming up, identifying a preferred alternative, or two potential preferred alternatives, one assuming the rezone is successful, the other not, that's probably going to be a 2 to 3 month process for us. I think we talked earlier today with your staff, with Scott and others, about how long that might take, and we're assuming that might occur sometime in maybe mid to late April. So it's going to take us some time to go through that next step regardless. And it's not going to really take us more or less time to do that step if we're considering kind of the A and B, the B2 option versus just, forget McKenzie Meadows and just proceed with the other option. So I don't know if that helps or not, but
does.
that is, I think.
There's a couple of things I wanted to mention. In some situations when we look at growing cities, there's kind of a property that might get moved on or something along those lines. We have no indication that that's the case here. So there's no kind of hard deadline to either our contracts or the properties that are rating well in the urban growth boundary kind of study area currently. But as Matt said, we can keep keep doing the work to help the city make it the best decision for the near future. We're not going to lose a lot of time by waiting to see what the county says about all of this, in my opinion.
I'd like to weigh in if I could. Mayor and I were both at the UGB steering committee on January 30th. And then, and obviously Scott was there, and staff. And I was also at the February 6th PC meeting as the new liaison for council. So I've got to see both recommendations live and in person, and the mayor saw the UGB steering committee. Both those bodies really recommended B2 to have a parallel path. So we're going down the path of, they recommended both with and without the McKenzie Meadows or whatever the 56, 58 acres, and doing both at the same time. The other thing I'd say is none or very few thought that going anywhere past 6 months would be recommended. And I think that 6-month number was said and agreed upon for the most part by both bodies. Now we're here in 9 months. Obviously, that's even without appeal. I think it's going to behoove us to pick the trigger ourselves, obviously, whatever that is. And B, I really want us to seriously consider the 6-month time frame, because that's what's been brought to us. Now, obviously, as a council, it's our final decision. Obviously, that's always the case. But we've had two different groups kind of say, hey, after 6 months, maybe we just need to punt and go with all of the priority 1 land that we know. I'm not telling you guys what to consider for yourselves. But I do take it really seriously that's what was offered up to us, and that was the recommendation.
So, thanks, Michael. I thought I heard Matt say that actually the 9 months included a potential appeal. Matt, could you clarify on that?
I think that's what Scott understood from talking to the county's planning manager, that the 9 months potentially did include an appeal, or at least a local appeal.
Didn't distinguish that, but I'm making an assumption, educated assumption that does. That's like the quick end of an appeal, of a decision and an appeal, a resolution of an appeal.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, because that would mean that we might end up with a decision point by 6 months, whereas if it was really going to take 9 months to get to the first decision, that would be starting to push it quite a bit. So.
And I'd like to see if Councilor Pellerin has any comments.
Yeah,
She's got her hand raised.
AKA Fred.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yep.
Hi. When I think about these options, I also think about the recent Senate Bill 1537. And I'm wondering if we could just get a recap on that, because it may sway me, at least, in terms of which option we go with.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that.
Matt,
So there,
just get some recent we looked into it a little deeper, so we have some additional information above and beyond of what we've provided in the past. So Matt, please.
yeah, so there was a decent amount of discussion about that at the Planning Commission meeting. And we did want to take a closer look at what are the requirements and the eligibility criteria associated with a UGB amendment under that Senate Bill 1537. And so we don't have, I'm not going to say we have a definitive answer, but we have looked at those requirements, and they're not just specific to the property that's being considered. They're also specific to some characteristics of the community and what the community has done and experienced in terms of a previous UGB amendment. And our kind of read of those requirements is that if that were to be, that process would be very difficult, and potentially not, you would potentially not be eligible to go through that process if you had finished up this UGB expansion process because of a couple of key provisions of Senate Bill 1537 that have to do with.
Interrupt for a second. Can you just explain to everybody the basics of what that bill allows?
Well, okay, yeah, I will. That bill, I will say, that's like an almost omnibus bill. It's like this huge bill with all kinds of stuff in it. And it's got several different provisions related to one-time urban growth boundary expansion. So I'll kind of focus on that, and I'll try to hit it pretty quickly. So it allows cities to go through a process for a one-time UGB expansion of a limited amount of a limited size. In Sister's case, it would be limited to 50 acres. It has some kind of strings attached to it in terms of requiring that a certain percentage of land or development within the expanded UGB area be devoted to affordable housing. And it's sort of done outside this kind of expansion process where you're showing the need for the expansion based on your long-term growth. So it's just a one-time deal. And the parts of it and it is initiated by a city. It's not initiated by a property owner, but it's something the city would need to initiate. And when the city initiates it, they would need to sort of open it up to property owners who thought they would be potentially eligible to participate in this process. But there are some limitations on the types of properties that could be brought in. You couldn't bring in land that was still zoned for forest or farm use. So any property that wanted to come in would have to be zoned for, like rezoned from farm or forest use to something else. And the pieces that I think would make it tough for y'all to do this have to do with when the most recent UGB process took place and how much of that land that had come in during that process had either been developed and or had concrete plans in place for annexation and provision of services and financial planning associated with those things. There's also an eligibility requirement related to being above, I believe it's above the state average for cost burdened households. I might not be getting that exactly right, but that's another eligibility criteria. So it's not a just kind of slam dunk kind of thing for you or really anybody else. And when we at our firm looked at those requirements, we think it would be pretty tough to go through that process in the near term once this current UGB process is completed. I mean, it would certainly not in the next, very unlikely in the next 5 years. And that's our reading. We have not asked for corroboration from DLCD, for instance, on this. We did have some early discussion with them about this, and they, gave us some cautions about you may or may not be eligible to go through this process. I mean, so they said that kind of early on. Hopefully that helped. And sorry about how long it was, but.
Yes, thank you. So you're saying that when you reviewed that process, that we can't exercise SB 1537 until our current UGB expansion process amendment process is fully completed. Is that my understanding?
Well, I wouldn't say that necessarily, but you wouldn't be able to consider, for instance, the McKenzie Meadows property until it's rezoned as part of that process. So it's sort of like you'd have to put the UGB process on hold to be able to consider the one-time expansion for anything except existing priority one lands, which we're already looking at anyway. So in reality, yeah, you'd be finishing up this process. I think the conversation around this previously was, well, if you continue to move forward with this process, if you didn't either pause or the McKenzie Meadows property didn't come in or wasn't rezoned, they can just kind of you could go for this 1537 process later down the line. And what I'm saying is going for it down the line is not a done deal. And in fact, I think would be unlikely that it would be successful. But I am not a land use attorney and I don't work for DLCD, but that is our initial assessment after looking at the rules.
I'll just try to maybe summarize very simply. The rules are kind of set up so that that after having done a UGB expansion, it's not likely that you'll be able to take another quick bite at the apple. They want to see that UGB that you just expanded into is already, largely getting developed and stuff. So it's not made up it's not written so that jurisdictions can do that in an easy way right after a UGB process.
Okay, thank you.
Point of clarity, I think I heard this correctly. So in other words, if we hadn't started down this road a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we were looking at our current UGB being full and thinking about an expansion, then we would be eligible under 1537 probably to proceed.
For that criteria.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
there's still a question of whether we meet exceed the state average for cost burdened rent. You think we would, but it's not. Bend, I think, went in and out of meeting that requirement before they finally did. So that we don't have numbers on that, but that's something we'd have to check.
Well, I've been scanning the bill as we were talking, and it is a mess.
Yep.
And we've been going longer than 2 years because it was in the comp plan in 2021. So UGB expansion's been talked about for 5 years, I would say. Probably.
I just read it today. Good times.
You're still awake. That's good. That's a little discouraging in some sense, but at the same time, it makes sense.
It makes sense, yeah.
The one thing I will say about that 1537, if we weren't going in the UGB process and we were considering that House bill expedited measure, it doesn't come close to helping us with what we really need, which is 250 acres, of which 70% is housing, something like that. So it doesn't suit our overall needs in any way, shape, or form. But it is disappointing to learn that we wouldn't necessarily have nothing but difficulty if we tried to do it right after this. So, but it is what it is.
Well, I was thinking in terms of, completing the UGB expansion amendment with the current alternatives and then exercising SB 1537 at a future date, opening that up to any property owner, including McKenzie Meadows, to make it fair. Because we have really worked hard on community outreach for this UGB process. I mean, we've had over 600 community members bring their input to us via online or at the open house. And McKenzie Meadows was not one of the alternatives put before them. So I'm very concerned about that. So maybe we can think about that. If we're going to suddenly include McKenzie Meadows, how do we go back now and ask the community, oh, by the way, here's another property?
I think I'll just respond to that really quickly. I do think there would be an opportunity to do that as part of this kind of B2, look at these couple of different options for our preferred alternatives. I think we need to do that. We want to do it. It would be very important to do it. And I think we could do that. And that's how we would use at least a portion of the time. So that we're talking about here, so that, we do get a sense of that from people. Yeah, I think that would be really important.
Okay, so I think we have two questions to answer, right? One, I think, is do we want to, communicate with the county, write a letter, something like that to, describe our interest in the process being, expedited. We understand that a lot of this is just can't move faster than the law allows. There's public hearing times and noticing times, things like that. So there's not a lot to hurry up. But that's first question. And then the second question is, do we feel comfortable with the recommendations from the two bodies that have already looked at this to have the consultants move forward with these parallel paths, one including that property and one not including that property? Does that make sense, everybody?
Yeah, and a quick question for Scott, based on what I think I heard you say, which is that they've already indicated you that they're expediting it themselves. And unless something comes up that's a hotter fire for them, they'll continue to do so. I'm assuming you have enough back and forth with the folks that if that fire starts to happen or that bigger, more important project lands in their lap, they would let you know that the process is going to be delayed at that time of decision.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Or we can do what we do sometimes as a city and just go, let's send a letter, and then it's on file, right? I don't know. I mean, we can do that too. But that's not, like I said, that's just an option.
All right, well, yeah, let's decide on the letter first. Counselor Pellerin, do you have an opinion on that?
I'm fine with the letter, as long as we're not annoying the county.
Counselor Ross? We're waving a hand.
I know, I just was thinking, I have no problem with sending a letter. I mean, I think that what I heard Scott say, it's not going to do a lot of good at this time, but I think we could send one now, asking it to be expedited. And when the time comes that if it's not going to be expedited, we can send the letter again and say, it said 4 months ago, we sent a letter asking this to be expedited. We're pushing it again on. I mean, you can send two. It's just,
Yeah, I think we have two
it's
pieces.
not a big deal to do it.
Is that a lot of staff time? No? Okay, got one written.
No, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, I'm kind of for sending it. Why not? I mean, they say it might not help or do anything, and won't do anything different, but at least we're on the record. And that's the thing I like about it.
Yeah, if it's not a lot of effort, I'm good.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I think there's a little bit of value in it. And yeah, as long as it doesn't take up staff time because you're busy, I think it's fair. But I think we're all on the same page. I think we all understand what can and can't be done at this point. So I don't think anybody's walking into this with any misconceptions or
We can put a smiley face on it, so it
Yeah,
comes from
yes.
good spirits
couple
side.
couple stickers. Okay.
Got that.
Do you need anything else in regards to?
I just want to make it clear, this is just a letter to ask to expedite the application, not weighing in at all on the merits or, just want to make sure everyone.
All right, and then the second question is our thoughts on moving forward with the recommendations from the Planning Commission and the UGB Steering Committee on that 2B option that would kind of direct staff and consultants to work on kind of these parallel planning visions.
I mean, I'll weigh in if you want.
I would love it.
Yeah, I think it behooves us to do the parallel path. I think there's two parts to that question though, is there a trigger? And if there is a trigger, what is it? A time frame? Is it an action? Is it two triggers with two actions? Honestly, I think that today we don't even have to worry about a trigger yet because nothing's going to really change for a little bit. But if we wanted to pick a number or pick an action, I think that's okay too. If we're doing a parallel path, it's going to be parallel for a certain amount of time. I don't know what that time is. I think that Matt and Andrew know way better than we do. So I'm okay with going parallel for a while. I don't think it's all that much extra work. It's basically, they're going to be looking at 250 acres over there. And then at some point, they're going to cut out the worst 58 and then add it over there. I don't think that that's too difficult of a task to ask a consultant. I think that they probably have done similar stuff in the past where they have a couple little options. So I'm okay with the parallel for a while. I do not like, and I really take seriously the recommendations of the both bodies, UGB steering committee and the planning commission, which is not in favor of an open-ended thing here. I think at some point we have to make a decision and go, it's going to be just 250 over there. If that, I don't know what triggers that, or I don't know what point that is. But I really think we should go parallel for a while. And if we need to come up with a trigger, we can do that now, or we can do that later. That's kind of my thought.
I'm kind of in the same place. I mean, these two groups advise us, it's important to listen to their voice. We don't always take it. I'm going to be upfront about that. We have at times said, no, that's not what we're going to do. But I think in this case, it's thoughtful. I would like us, if we do this, to have a check-in at some period of time before the trigger. So if it's a 6-month window, maybe we have a check-in at the 3rd month or the 4th month to see what kind of progress we're making. Do we think we're going to make that 6-month trigger? And because if it looks like we aren't going to make it, we may want to take and continue on with the option A, or whatever we want to call it, avenue, rather than waiting and knowing that we're probably not going to make our hopeful deadline down the road. And we'll have a better idea of that probably in May. I'm picking a date. I'm just kind of looking, you know, the planning process better than I do, Scott, but I would like us to kind of to have a staff check-in where the progress is, and a report back to this group about where we are on that at some period of time before that trigger point.
May we have the slide back up that had the timeline on it? I think it was the first slide. Thank you. Counselor Pellerin?
Yeah, I don't know much about the county process for rezoning. Maybe Scott can weigh in on this, but along the way, as they're evaluating this property, will they be giving us a status? Will they say, yeah, it looks like we need about 2 more months, or we need another month? Or are we in the dark until it's finished?
We'll keep close contact with them, and I think by May they hopefully would have at least the dates for when the hearing officer might issue a decision, and possibly a date for a county commissioner hearing as well. So I would think by then we would have some more information to share.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to go with what the steering committee and the planning commission recommended. I mean, personally, this has been a 4 or 5 year process. I know this part of it seems like it was only a couple months long, but we've been working on this for a number of years. So to us, we're close to the finish line. And I certainly don't want to rush things, but we've been making really good time and pacing this very well, I think. And I don't want to, pause the process or prolong it because, there's other lands that can come in this process that could be developed relatively soon as well. This isn't the only piece of property that is going to be possibly developed early. So, yeah, I don't necessarily want to do anything that elongates the process. However, as the consultants describe, we do have some time, where, hard decisions don't have to be made yet for a little while. So I'm okay going with the parallel process. I think I'd rather have a trigger point that was an action than a time, so I think if there's a time that we've kind of done everything we could and it's like, okay, it's preferred alternative time. I mean, that might be it for me. I think that might make more sense than a time, because, we could run into some hiccups as well. Our process could get elongated, possibly as well. So for one thing or another. So I think an action would be the better boundary on that.
Honestly, we're the people in charge of the trigger, the 5 of us. So we don't have to necessarily define it right now, like I said. and maybe it's smart not to, because all we're doing is pinching ourselves to make a decision. So there, maybe we just go forward with the parallel and just kind of see how things go. And if it feels like nothing's going to happen, or, you know, or there's only one alternative left, there's only one alternative standing, you know, that's okay. And we can certainly make that decision ahead of time as a body. So I think that's important to remember, for just us to grasp, because sometimes we just want to put it in code and forget about it, move on with our lives. And in fact, this is a process that, who knows? 3 months from now, we might still be bogged down in the other alternative. Who knows? So anyway.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry, I wouldn't want this to slow us down any more than the 6 months that we did talk about, unless we are already slowed down. You know, if we're already slowed down by something else, that's fine. And, you know, because we're not moving anyway. I really am intrigued by the dates that might be available to us in a few months. And, you know, if that's 3 months down the road, and we were able to have kind of a look-see into what the county is going to be able to offer us. And if we saw at that point that it was going to be 9 months out, we could just put a kibosh on it right there. Yeah, I'm feeling like I want another check-in point. I think that would be most comfortable with that, and I wouldn't want it to be too far out, but it sounds like that might be the most logical next check-in point.
At what stage is the next steering committee meeting?
Yeah, so we were talking about that today. We're targeting the middle of April or so. So then the planning commission meeting would be maybe the end of April, and then it'll be May by the time it got to council. So that may be a good check-in time for you guys for us to give you an update and see where it's at, and then you can make a decision, maybe a more informed decision at that time.
I think that I want to add one more thing into the record, and that is that it's unfortunate that this is happening, this rezone request, at the time that it is, and didn't happen at an earlier time. This land rezone request that occurred a year or two ago or whatever, we would definitely be looking at that land as part of the priority 1 lands. And so for those in the room that are wondering why we're even having this discussion, is because if it is successful, we will have to look at it as priority 1 land. If it's not successful, we won't. But I think I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that we're kind of put in this position by the timing of this, but every sort of a thing with every business and every group has the reasons for what they're doing and how they're doing it. We have to work around those or work with them. So I think that's where I am. And that's why I kind of like that one check-in at some point in time, just to kind of let us know.
I'm good with the check-in. Yeah.
I want to go back to something Matt said about as part of the process, you know, with whether it's a delay or not, but over the next couple months, if you're looking at 2 different alternatives, the public outreach, and would the steering committee meeting and then the following planning commission and city council have a report out on whatever those activities look like? Because that could also be a part of that check-in, is what did the community say as we looked at these different alternatives again? Did you guys talk about there, have a sense of what those events or activities might look like over the next couple of months?
We didn't talk exactly about what those activities might look like. We have talked about that a little bit before as a team. It could be kind of a meeting and a quick survey, you know, just somewhat similar to what we did before, but at I will say a smaller scale, simply because we wouldn't have as much information to present or as many questions to ask people. But it could look something like that. The other thing that we talked about as a group was just, should we be doing that before or after we are back with the steering committee and the planning commission and council to talk about these 2 parallel path alternatives and kind of what they look like. So I think those were the questions for us. And I think the other thing I would say is what we talked about was putting together kind of a more detailed schedule and time frame for those upcoming activities. And then, sharing it with folks and seeing what they thought. So that's as much as we've really talked about. I don't think we get into the details beyond that. Is that fair, Andrew and Scott?
Yeah, I'll just say that I think we'd want to have, if we're talking to folks about a preferred alternative that includes the Mackenzie Meadows Village property, we want to have put a lot of thought into that, and that we were thinking that that would happen after kind of a April-May discussion with the various committees at the city. So I don't think we were talking about that happening in the coming weeks, basically.
Okay, yeah.
You have enough information?
Yeah, what do you need from us?
We're waiting for you to go, okay.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, we have enough information to move forward. Scott, you agree?
Yeah, it sounds like you're okay with submitting a letter, possibly 2 letters, even though it may not have a influence initially, and that you're wanting to do another check-in, not have necessarily a trigger date established, but a check-in around May, to reassess with hopefully more information. May, June, somewhere around there.
I think it'd be safe to assume that by then we're going to know a lot more information, and we'll be able to make some kind of decision to either add an actual trigger probably, or just we wouldn't be able to include it. I think it's fair to say that, because I think we're going to know a lot more 3 months down the road, 4 months down the road. Is that fair to say? Yeah, just making sure.
Councilor Pellerin?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Okay, so we've got a little bit more on our presentation here. So let's move forward to the alternatives report.
Yeah, just a time check, Scott. Do we have another until 6:30? I've got some information that kind of involves maps and the things that we've talked about as priority 1 land so far, and then a couple of informational items about U.S. Forest Service land and airport areas near the airport. So do we have enough time to cover that? And just let me know if I should just keep going.
I think we have 20 more minutes. We want to go right up to 6:30.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have 20 minutes to get that information covered, if you can do that.
Okay, great. So I'm going to talk about what I think was in your packet, the draft UGB alternatives report. This report is what provides the factual base and kind of the framework to support the city's ultimate decision on the urban growth boundary. All the things that check the boxes that the state will want to see. The final version, we're expecting to include the preferred alternative. Kind of given what we've heard from groups so far, we're going to prepare something like a draft of 2 different preferred alternatives, and that will eventually turn into one that the city proposes as its urban growth boundary expansion. We have a variety of pretty detailed metrics under each of the Goal 14 criteria that we've been talking about. These criteria are things that we can measure or have at least put into writing, kind of how we're thinking about them. And they have a weight of, this is a very important thing. This is not a very important thing. This is measured in a number of different ways. So maybe we don't need to weight it very highly, or this is kind of a really unique attribute. And so the report, we have these tables that kind of describe this in some detail. These are informed by the conversations that we've had, the presentations that we've made, and the online survey that we put together, kind of about which of the things that the state says you need to evaluate are the most important and that the community cares about the most. And we've tried to be really explicit about where we've plugged those in. Generally, each parcel in the study area is given a score. So it's either, 1 is low, 5 is high, and then there's a weight for the overall metrics. So it's parcel size, for example, that matters a bit about in the case of developability. So it's pretty important. So we give that a weight. And then the overall factor, which is how efficient is land to develop, that gets its own weight. So there's kind of a series of multiplications that happen. A parcel has numbers associated with each of those attributes, and it gets a score, basically. And so we have a number of maps that show those scores for all those criteria rolled up into the factors that the state wants us to write findings about. There are a couple of sort of new things that we put together because we talked with our sub-consultant, Johnson Economics, just about land developability in situations like this, where you have kind of rural subdivisions that are that might consider whether it makes financial sense to redevelop. And so they provided us with a couple of specific criteria that fall into factor one. One of those is the number of expected lots that you would get out of a parcel. So if you were to develop at urban densities, how many typical residential lots might you expect to see? And so the map on the right shows those kind of the pale and blue parcels are showing between 0 and 10 or up to 20 lots that you might get out of that. And on these maps, there's a box that says this is about the number of developable acres we're looking for, about 250 acres, just to kind of give a sense of proportion in what we're looking at. So there's the number of lots, and then there's the value of those lots, which takes into account as compared to what the current value of that site is. So that takes into account what is developed on the site currently, and what the how many acres are assumed to be kind of available on that site. And so what you see here is the red properties, they have enough development on the site. They're not going to get enough new lots coming out of those that they really make less sense than other criteria. And the reason we're doing this is because it kind of makes intuitive sense that there are some areas in this priority one land that don't make a whole lot of sense to urbanize, and you need to kind of dive in a little bit to the specifics of how development actually works to kind of tease that out and give it a number and put it on a map and write findings about it. Our report also assigns an overall score for each of these alternatives, because they're more than just the sum of their parts. They're kind of the shape and the relationship to the city of Sisters currently, and how far they are, how much sense that the kind of arrangement of parcels makes. So we've done that, and given them kind of some crude scoring along those lines. Alternative 5, because it's very close into the existing city, it performs well on a number of these factors. Alternative 1 also performs very well on a number of these factors. But since we're going to be potentially evaluating another property, I wouldn't get too hung up on these numbers and these alternatives just at this moment. But we have prepared an overall factor score for the priority one lands as evaluated to date. Factor 1 is about what the size of the property is, how developable they are, whether they have any CC&Rs that prohibit further infill. And so these maps you've seen kind of versions of before, I think, but lands that are closer into the city and west of the floodplain area, or the creek area, perform well. Factor 2, topography and proximity to the city. So factor 2 is about infrastructure and being able to, get pipes there. So these properties score well that are kind of in blue here. Factor 3 is kind of a smorgasbord of items, but proximity to the city and being away from wildlife corridors are the thing that score well in this criteria. And factor 4 is about farm and forest land, so things that don't abut farm and forest land score well. And then if you roll up all those assumptions and all those scores and all the weighting for all of those, you get a total weighted score. And we're seeing, basically, we're looking for a way to get the real cream of the crop properties in a way that makes a fair amount of sense. And so these this is one lens to view the study area properties, and again, we've got this example 250 acre block here, but this is what the roll up of our assumptions look like, and as so we're our task basically is to find the right 250 acres or so of the best performing properties here, and then do some adjustments to make it make sense as an actual boundary. But this is kind of where our analysis, if you do the numbers, where that's pointing, and applying this to our kind of thinking about the alternatives to date is what we're up to currently. So the steering committee recommendation was to kind of move forward creating a preferred alternative using basically the best parcels from alternative 1 and alternative 5. Those are the ones that did well in the community kind of engagement. Those are the ones whose properties are in kind of the bluer areas here. And then to create another additional alternative that incorporates the McKenzie Meadows Village property that's successfully rezoned, evaluate that using the same set of criteria here, and finalize or at least create another draft of that alternatives analysis report. Okay, so it's 6:18. How about I just go ahead and talk about U.S. Forest Service lands and the airport? Is that okay, Scott?
Say maybe just pause right there just to see if anybody has any questions before you move on to that. Does any counselor have questions on the alternatives analysis?
No, I'll just point out that even though a lot of the filters we're looking at these properties through are kind of focusing on housing, that is our top priority. We need open space, we need parkland, we need business lands, we need industrial lands too. So yeah, just because it doesn't come up as having the highest parcelization properties doesn't mean that it's not a suitable piece of property. That's all.
I feel like I haven't been part of a discussion where we talked about like how much it matters, what people's CC&Rs are as to whether we want to bring them in or not. I feel like that's a really big topic, and I don't feel like we've drilled down on that. And I am uncomfortable not talking about it and just ending up with 250 acres and not knowing how much of that just really isn't going to move forward. I definitely understand that there are some parcels that can be parkland and other, types, commercial, et cetera. But if there are lots that we're bringing in that the owners really have no, 20-year plan that they would want to do any kind of changes, I don't feel like that benefits us. And I just hadn't heard that spoken out loud in a group meeting, and I just wanted to bring it up and see where that lands in our conversations. So
yeah, I'm going to jump in real quick and just say we have talked about it to some degree. In part of the sort of context in which we've talked about it is that we've had discussions with the state, with the LCD staff about this, and have been told that we can't exclude properties simply because they have CC&Rs. We can talk about what the potential impact on feasibility of development would be, and we can consider that and factor that into this analysis, and that's essentially what we're doing or attempting to do. What we've also heard is that we can't exclude a property simply because somebody says, well, I don't plan to develop it in 20 years, because they might not be the ones that are in control of that property in 20 years. So that's just something we very consistently hear from the state on that. But I would also say, I would agree with you in that it is an important factor, and it doesn't make sense to be bringing a bunch of land in if nobody's going to develop it. That's what I would say. And so we have had some discussion about it, but not a ton. I would acknowledge that. But that's sort of the discussion we've had up to this point. It is a factor we are looking at. It's not going to be the single factor to exclude something because it can't be per the state rules. And it's challenging to find. The state has said, well, find some precedents where that was sort of, considered or part of the decision. And it's pretty hard to find the precedents. So we're a little bit between a rock and a hard place on that one in terms of, not having a lot of precedents, having to sort of factor it in somehow, and having a limited sort of ability or amount of information to do that. But it's kind of doing our best, I guess, is how I would put it. So I don't know if that helps, but.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. You have done an extremely great level of analysis, and I can see that through all the different filters you've showed us the data. So I definitely appreciate that. And I appreciate you pointing out, how the state looks at this. That's helpful to me. I obviously am fairly new to this, and trying to understand exactly where our constraints are is that's helpful information.
Really quickly, if I could
Thank you.
add to it, it's kind of a cool social construct that we're bound by in that sense, because there's nobody in this room that wants 20 years of development to happen in the next 6 months. So what I'm saying is, if there are some lands that are coming in and people are somewhat resistant to annex themselves, maybe that's not such a horrible thing in the sense that, hey, we're not going to have sprawl because it's not going to all be built out in the next 6 months. It's a 20-year plan. If some of it doesn't get built out ever, that's probably just fine. We try and supply ourselves with the best land possible, but as you know, just looking at the map, there's 100, 150 acres that are looking really good, and the other 100 acres are, wow, that's going to be hard. And I think that's, again, I think it's okay, and I think it binds us to doing the best plan that we can without it being perfect.
I'm a little concerned that we haven't heard the Forest Service and airport component of this.
Yeah, so let's move on with that.
All right. I will, these were the kind of the summary of some informational meetings we had with Forest Service folks and folks from the ODA. So it has been brought up that, why aren't we looking at Forest Service lands? I've heard about the U.S. Forest Service providing lands for affordable housing in other communities. So we decided to talk to our local representative, and we have some information to report. Land conveyance, as they call it, can occur under what they call the Townsite Act. Cities can acquire up to 640 acres per this act from the federal government for townsite purposes. And this is all written in kind of old-timey language. Oregon is one of the eligible states. Communities need to submit an application, and there's a bunch of required studies to justify the acquisition of this land. And the City of Sisters has actually done this previously for the wastewater treatment plant, and I think the Woodlands property was kind of this or a similar process. But it is a discretionary decision on the part of the U.S. Forest Service. The city has to show that there's no alternative sites that are available to meet the need, and you need to demonstrate that the action is in the best interests of the federal government. And the process can take many years. There's a lot of public comment and tribal consultation and environmental studies that are required to go this route. So, we don't think it's the appropriate way currently for the City of Sisters to meet its needs. And we won't assume that federal land in the vicinity is available for urban uses, but we'll continue to coordinate with the U.S. Forest Service, and there might be lots of opportunities kind of long-term to think about what happens in the vicinity of Sisters on Forest Service land.
Yeah, Andrew, just to summarize real quick, I think the key provision in that Townsite Act is that you have to demonstrate that there's no other lands that you could have to meet the need, and I don't think we can make that claim right now. And then two, they have a provision for conveying administrative sites for housing, but we already did that with the Sisters Woodlands and the Three Peaks Industrial. The sell-off of those parcels basically met that, or fulfilled that option for us. So just wanted to summarize that, Andrew, if you want to go ahead and move on to the airport.
Yeah, we also met with folks from ODA who talked about kind of the state's opinion about land use near airports. They've got a whole guidebook and they've got a variety of zones that apply to basically the land underneath these conical surfaces that happen kind of at a radiating distance from any given airport runway. So the areas that are of most interest to us are this bright orange on this map area, which is the transitional surface, and then the land that's immediately at the front and back of the airport runway. So this encompasses some of the land that we are looking at as priority one land, and there's basically a guidebook for the federal government about land use near airports. And in that transitional surface area, there are some things that are listed as incompatible, including residential uses, places of public assembly, golf courses, sports fields, and amusement parks. So when you're right next to the runway, there are some height limitations. Those taper off pretty fast, but kind of in that maybe 1,500 foot vicinity, they list those things as not compatible. So generally, the guidance that we heard was, move residential uses, move kind of these big attractors where people go away from the runway to the extent possible, and other uses like industrial uses or outdoor storage, things like that make a lot more sense for land that's really close to the airport. So we will take that into our thinking as we move towards the end of the process that we have here, which is where we start to think about exactly what land uses go where, because there's more than just residential uses that we're trying to plan for in this expanded area. We're going to look at the zoning code to think about limiting building heights as things get developed closer to the airport. And we're going to continue to coordinate with ODA and the Sisters Eagle Airport as we continue to put this plan together.
And I would just briefly add a couple of things. One is that the height restrictions are actual requirements. The city, can't allow things to be built above a certain height within a certain distance of the airport. And as Andrew said, those taper off pretty quickly. The incompatible uses pieces, those are guidelines. Those are important for us to think about, but they're not actual state requirements or federal requirements. What the Oregon Department of Aviation official did say is that the main impact, if you do allow things, and city has allowed some of that to occur, or people have done that in the past, there are residences within that area, is that it can have an impact on the airport's ability to access federal grant funds. That's the main kind of impact of allowing and what's identified as an incompatible use within the transitional area, as long as you're limiting the heights appropriately. So I did just want to point that out, that the guidelines are a little on the squishy side. So important for us to be thinking about, but not absolute requirements. So.
All right, thank you. Anybody have any questions before we end the workshop? Okay, great. Anything, last words?
Nope, just thanks for the input.
Okay, thank you, Andrew and Matt, and we'll adjourn this workshop and start our regular city council meeting at 6:40 in 10 minutes.
Thank you all.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody to our 6:30 city council meeting, which is starting here at 6:40. We have a very busy meeting tonight, and then we also have a Urban Renewal Agency meeting following our meeting tonight as well. So we're hoping to manage to get a full night of sleep, especially for our staff. So we'll get right into it. So let's do our Pledge of Allegiance first. You will join us with that if you're interested.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Letts.
Here.
President Beal,
Here.
Ross,
Present?
Party on.
Halloran.
Here.
Who's here in spirit and voice. All right, do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
I second.
Okay, no more snacks over here. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you. And then we're going to have a short presentation here before we get to visitor communication, and we'll ask Representative Kristen Eby from Treehouse Therapies to come up to the podium. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. Good evening. So yeah, my name is Kristen Eby, and I am the Executive Director and founder of Treehouse Therapies. Treehouse Therapies is a nonprofit pediatric therapy clinic. We provide physical therapy, occupational therapy, and behavioral health services to children. We have clinics in Bend, Redmond, Warm Springs, and a small satellite clinic here in Sisters at Pole Creek Ranch, where we use the horse for equine assisted therapy. For the past year, I have been meeting with Superintendent Scholes and Jennifer Holland from Sisters Park and Rec about a proposal and a plan to utilize the unused classrooms in the old elementary school or the new community center. Treehouse Therapies, we currently have about 550 children on our wait list for behavioral health and occupational therapy. The majority of these kids are between the ages of 5 and 12 years old, and they're from all over Central Oregon. They've been referred to us because of behaviors that are interfering with their ability to function at school or at home or in the community. We have developed a program that specifically meets these behavioral challenges. It is a program that we call Aspen. Aspen is an interdisciplinary family approach to behavioral modification that utilizes the skills of an occupational therapist as well as a behavioral health therapist, and includes the family in therapy as well. It is an intensive program that is designed to address the problematic behaviors in a behavioral modification type of treatment. And the goal of it is to help children return to school, be able to function better at school, at home, and in the community. We are excited to partner with Sisters Park and Rec and the school district, as we know it will have a positive impact on children and families right here in Sisters. To be able to better participate in education, as well as the recreational services that they provide, as well as positively impact children throughout Central Oregon. So, as most of you know and have heard, behavioral health right now is a significant issue among our youth. Our schools and community are in need of these services. We have proposed that, again, we would like to utilize the currently unutilized space to address this significant need. We have developed a program that will do that. And additionally, we feel like we are good partners with the other programs that are in the building, including preschool and childcare programs, where we can partner to treat in a more preventative way. We see children from birth to 18 years old, and our goal is to address the immediate needs that exist within our communities to then be able to work towards prevention by providing services to children before they enter grade school. I have spoken with the child care providers and preschool teachers who are currently in that building, and they seem to be excited about the potential of having us in the building and partnering with us. Kurt, Jennifer, and I have met with Scott Woodward and Jordan Wheeler from the city, who have communicated the need to overcome the obstacle of the current coding definition for this space as a community center. They have indicated that a broadening of the code's definition of community center would be needed in order for Treehouse Therapies and our programs to fit within the terms of its use. To this end, they have recommended that I come to all of you and initiate this process by an appeal to you to approve staff to work on a text amendment to the code. Thank you for your time and your consideration in this request.
Thank you.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, since this is, we placed this item under presentations. We had a meeting with the Treehouse and the school district on Friday about this issue. And thank you for your presentation. As Kristen said, that the staff is support pursuing this, and just ask that you come and present to city council, and so we can get your direction to initiate and pursue a text amendment to the community development code.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, how much room are you gonna need there at the old elementary school? Or,
Um,
excuse me, at the new community center?
Yes. Well, in the conversations that I've had with Kurt initially, like I said, we started this conversation about a year ago. And initially, I just thought, we could use some of the buildings to sort of just start a small program here that would really focus on sisters. And as he showed me the space, and I realized that if the space was available and we were given the opportunity to utilize more of the space, we could potentially accommodate the children on our wait list. That would mean, then what we started talking about was utilizing 7 of those classrooms that currently aren't earmarked for any other purpose.
And how would you said this from all over Central Oregon, how would they get here?
Yeah, so that would be the challenge that we would need to overcome. But these families, many of them on our wait list, have been waiting for over a year. So I think they would overcome that and want to be seen. It's often the case where families call in and they are devastated when they hear that we have that kind of wait list. And the thing that we are pushed up against is space. We are a nonprofit, and we are growing. We just opened our satellite here to be able to grow, to expand, to continue to meet the needs of our kids. So it is a space issue. And also we have been this past year really working and honing in on this program to specifically address this need. So we're at this point where we have developed it, we've piloted it, it's been very successful. And we see that utilizing that space, we could put teams of therapists, the OT and the behavioral health, in 6 of those classrooms, seeing kids, up to 6 kids a day for an hour each with the parent. They would come twice a week, each child. It is an intensive program, and so they would know that they are here for a certain period of time. They're coming here for a certain period of time. It's not ongoing forever. So that's the other thing that we think why they would come to Sisters to participate in that, knowing that it's twice a week for 3 to 6 months and then done and back to functioning at home, at school. And
All right.
yeah.
You have my support.
Oh, thank you.
Quick question. One, how many youth do you have in it regionally?
We see over 700 kids a year in our programs.
And as an individual who in Fishburne worked and managed a building for middle school age youth with behavioral disorder, I see the result of what happens when there's not early intervention. And I applaud your efforts, and I'm very much in support of it. I think many of the youth that we dealt with, if they'd had intervention at younger ages, might not have had some of the issues they were dealing with when they hit puberty and everyone else starts to go crazy.
Well, and we also just really see the need to incorporate the family in with what we're doing, and earlier the better. There is a lot of just parent education and just training, and that is when these behaviors happen, that it's very much, if you don't work with the families, you're only addressing just a part of the issue.
Comments or?
No, I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Counselor Pellerin, if you don't have any comments, I think we'll just take a head nod that we will direct the city manager to direct the staff to work on the text amendment that would allow them to operate at that location.
I did have a question on SBRD. How you're talking about 6 to 7 classrooms? How many total classrooms are there? And has SBRD, is it too early that they haven't been able to fill those rooms with other services or other events?
I'm assuming that, I know part of the deal was that the school district was going to retain control over one of the wings. And I'm assuming, is this in that wing that they have control over? Yes, she's giving me a head nod. So
Okay.
technically the school district's side of that property still.
But we would still have to do a text amendment, even though it's in that wing,
Yes, it
controlled by the school.
has to do with the zoning on the ground. Okay, well, I think we got a head nod from everybody. Yeah, we would like to
Yeah, and
have to move forward.
we talked about the timeline and kind of what this might look like. Tentatively, maybe bring this back for a brief work session at the next meeting. Since it is a text amendment to the development code, it would have to go through planning commission and city council with hearings, but we think we can expedite this as quick as possible, targeted for perhaps April-ish for a public hearing, and, you know, maybe have them in there by the summertime. I think that was their goal was around June, so I think we can probably accommodate that.
So we're not on the county timeline.
Not
I think we can, yeah, we can be a little more nimble. All right, well, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. We can move on to visitor communication. I have some forms here, and also we will start with people in the audience and then move on to people on Zoom, if there are anyone on Zoom that would like to make a public comment. So I will just start with Mitchell Luftig. We ask that people keep their comments to around 3 minutes, and if you can just give us your name and address, that would be fantastic.
My name's Mitchell Luftig. I live at 1014 East Horseback Trail in the Saddlestone development. And a group of homeowners in Saddlestone sent an open letter to the city council requesting whatever assistance you can provide in appealing the high fire hazard area for all the tax lots in our development. In addition to that, very recently there was a Capitol Chronicle article featuring a discussion with Senator Golden, who has apparently shown some interest in perhaps amending, forget the name of the bill, to allow for more of a broad labeling or classification of areas as opposed to specific tax lots. Mr. Wheeler shared with me a letter that the city had previously written to the Oregon Forester, providing arguments about using the wildland urban interface map as opposed to the wildland fire hazard map, and talking about the importance of being able to have one code across the city that would provide direction for residents in how to harden their homes and prevent wildfires. But it seems like an optimal time to write a similar letter, perhaps to Senator Golden, expressing from the point of view of the city how an amendment that allowed the city to have one moderate classification of fire risk or hazard would enable then the city to pursue the code development that they were apparently are interested in. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I just throw this in? It's Senate Bill 1511, I believe is the one you were talking about.
And as an aside, Senator Gold was the one who initially sponsored that bit of legislation, so he's the one who's trying to undo what didn't happen that he wanted to have happen.
And just for future reference, you know, we know this is a community concern. We didn't have enough time to put it on our agenda. However, at the end of our meeting, we do have our mayor and council business. And so I think we'd all previously agreed that we will chat about this topic at that point at the end of the council meeting. So if anyone wants to stick around, we will talk about this topic later. Thank you. Chris Sandusky.
Hi, thank you. It's just a couple of comments about the difference
If
with
you
the
could state your name and your address, please.
Yeah, Chris Zandowski.
Zandowski, oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's always been mispronounced. I live on West Williamson, and in my backyard, I have two trees that are diseased, and I've been trying to get them cut down. And because of what the rules are within Sisters, I can't get them cut down without having an arborist and then et cetera. And we're going to be dealing with 58 acres behind where I live. And those are all beautiful pine trees that are probably 100 or more years old. And they're not like juniper, which, you know, kind of go like rabbits, just multiply. So that we're taking down a lot of trees. And I think that we should also look at that part. I understand developers, owners wanting to make a profit on that. Through this, though, I have noticed that you've only been mentioning McKenzie Meadows. And I live within Village of Cold Springs. And I'm understanding, I couldn't quite see from your maps, but I'm understanding that it also comes into the Village of Cold Springs, some of the division that you're talking about with the 58 acres. So I'd appreciate it if it would also be mentioned every time that you mention McKenzie Meadows, that it would also be Village of Cold Springs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we do that partially because the property, that is kind of, I think the LLC name on it is.
Pardon?
The LLC name on that property is Mackenzie Meadows.
We own one of the properties that will be within that division that they're talking, you know, to build behind us.
Yeah, but the property that, those three parcels, the official name, you know, is Mackenzie Meadows. And I can understand the confusion because there's also Mackenzie Meadows and there's a Cold Springs and.
Yeah, because
It's
that
a
is
little
part of the
redundant.
Village of Cold Springs and everything.
Yeah.
So it should be not just Mackenzie Meadows, I think. Thank you.
Heidi Dixon. Oh, okay. Marvin Inman. Yes, this is just public comment. Anything you want. And this is the. Oh, the SDCs? We do have a public hearing during that. Yeah, okay, then let's wait till that.
It's confusing sometimes as to when
Yeah.
things occur based upon
Yeah.
the process that has to be followed legally.
Tonight, our agenda has one of every possible thing we can do as a council, I think, so thank you. Is there anybody online who was interested in talking? Okay. You're welcome to come up. And just state your name and address.
Marvin Inman. I live at 1654 West Eakin Avenue in the Hayden Homes development, one of the older parts of it. Couple of questions. One is, why does Sisters need to grow? And what benefit is it to the city other than just tax money on all the homeowners? And the other question is, the consideration of building out to Tollgate, then Tollgate becomes an issue with the city. You've got thousands of trees around Tollgate that if you're hardening your homes, you're building right up next to a county, because they're not in the city, right? Tollgate is not in the city. So now you've built right up to the border of a heavily treed area. Also, you're going to have a road going out to Highway 20 because the existing streets are not going to be able to accommodate 200 or 300 more family homes and apartments. So all that consideration, you're going to create more traffic hitting Highway 20 coming back through the roundabout. That, quoting a traffic expert, when we first started developing Hayden Homes, he said, we have to save our little roundabout. So now you're going to increase traffic. Probably half the people will be coming out and going down Highway 20 and coming through that little roundabout. And I think those things really need to be considered. I'm not in favor of that land being developed, but I know who owns it and, there's money to be made. But right now, in the next 5 to 8 years, we have a glut of apartments that you're not going to see rented by the time those things get built out. That's my 2 cents worth on that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as submitted.
I second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
Good job, Cheryl.
All right, on to council business. We do have a public hearing for ordinance 541. Jacob Smith will be helping us with this, and I have 3 pages of reading that we all get to listen to. So this is the time set for a public hearing on city file TA 24-04. TA also stands for text amendment, and application for text amendments to the Sisters Development Code, section 3.2.500, existing trees submitted by the City of Sisters. The hearing is now called to order. Public hearing will be conducted as follows. Staff will make a presentation and councilors may ask questions to the staff. Entry of additional correspondence received into the record. Opening the public hearing for testimony in the following order. Testimony of anyone in support of the proposal, anyone in opposition, and any neutral testimony in that order. Questions of staff, if any, by the City Council. And then we will close the public testimony portion of the hearing and no further testimony. Discussion and decision by the City Council. All right, testimony will be accepted in person and remotely via Zoom. If you would like to speak, please provide your testimony after you are called. If you do not wish to provide testimony, please say no testimony after you are called. Any questions should be directed to me as the mayor. When you testify, please state your name and address for the record, and please speak clearly and loudly to ensure testimony is heard as this hearing is being recorded. Callers will be muted after their testimony concludes. At my discretion, I may limit testimony to 3 minutes per person. I would encourage those wishing to speak to keep testimony concise and relevant to the issue before us this evening. It is encouraged to simply agree with a point made by another person instead of remaking the point. For the deliberations, the applicable substantive criteria are listed in the staff report. These are the criteria the City Council must use in making its decision. All testimony and evidence must be directed toward these criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or other land use regulations that the person testifying believes apply to this decision. Testimony that is not directed towards applicable or potentially applicable approval criteria, even if a strong point is ultimately not relevant. Failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity, there we go, to afford the City Council and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the City Council to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the city council to provide further opportunity to present additional relevant evidence or testimony that is within the scope of this hearing. Now, everybody repeat that back to me.
I'm just glad I don't have to do it anymore.
I
I was thinking the same thing.
Not even done yet. All right, disclosures. At this time, I'll ask if any counselors have any conflicts of interest. If so, please disclose the nature of the conflict and whether the member believes the conflict would preclude the member from objectively participating in these proceedings. Counselor Ross.
No conflicts. I will state for the record that I was the Urban Forestry Board representative from the council during the time that this was discussed and brought forward. So I'm aware of what discussions have occurred, but was not involved in putting the decision together.
Okay, Counselor Predin.
No conflicts.
Counselor McDougall.
No conflicts.
Counselor Pellerin.
No conflicts.
Mayor Letts, have no conflicts as well. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the ability of any counselor to hear this matter? Okay. Staff may now present their report.
Okay. Good evening. My name's Jacob Smith. I do code enforcement for the City of Sisters. I'm here to present Ordinance 541, which is an ordinance that amends the Sisters Development Code, adding in a specific penalty for the removal of significant trees on developing lots. A significant tree per the development code is a tree that has a diameter, 8-inch diameter, is measured 4.5 feet up from the ground. I'll call that the DBH of the tree moving forward. A developing lot, when someone owns a property owner comes in, they want to do something with their property, they'll most of the time meet with a planner and discuss the regulations that are in our development code that apply to what they're trying to build. A key part of this is finding all the trees, the significant trees on this lot, and the planner and the property owner work together to preserve as many of those as they possibly can. During this process, a map is made so the city or code enforcer is aware of what trees are allowed to be there and which ones are allowed to be removed. Early 2024, we did have a large significant tree removed. The developer was issued a citation. The citation back then and currently is $500. That was paid and that ended the code enforcement. So staff was tasked with making sure that this code is sufficient to protect significant trees on developing lots. I started off the process with taking a look at other communities and what they do for similar tree issues. I put together 3 different options and brought these 3 different options to the Urban Forestry Board on May 13th, 2024. Excuse me. The 3 options, the first one was what I call a kind of a standard citation. It was $500 to $2,000. The second option was the 2 tree sizes were broken up. So a DBH between 8 and 20 was $2,000 and a DBH more than 20 was $4,000. And the third option was to assign a fine of $300 per DBH of the tree that was removed.
Per inch of DBH.
Illegally removed. $300 per inch, excuse me. The Urban Forestry Board was supportive of the third option, but wanted more in the penalty. They suggested adding the value of the tree be added to the citation. On July 8th, 2024, I drafted up an ordinance that had the $300 per DBH of that tree, in addition to the value of the tree being assessed as a fine. That motion was passed to recommend that draft. Next, we took that draft to a workshop planning commission on August 15th, 2024. There was general support for the ordinance and there was no suggestions for specific changes. That code draft was brought on October 9th, 2024 to a city council workshop. Council directed staff to simplify the code amendment, or excuse me, the amendment They wanted to see just the 300 per DBH, and they did not want any option for the value of the tree added on there. So I drafted that ordinance back up, which again was just the 300 per DBH of the tree. We took that to the Planning Commission for a public hearing on January 16th, 2025. And the Planning Commission recommended approval of that text amendment 2404. And that draft amendment is the same as the attachment B in the staff report.
Okay, thank you. And have we received any correspondence on this matter other than those items included in the agenda materials?
I have not received any.
All right, questions of staff. At this time, I will ask each counselor whether they have any questions for the staff. Questions will be stated by each counselor. Staff will respond after all questions have been asked by counselors. When your name is called, please ask your questions or indicate that you have no questions. Or down here, Counselor Peden.
I have no question.
Counselor McDougall.
No questions.
Counselor
None.
Ross. Okay. Counselor Pellerin.
No questions.
I have no questions either. In public testimony, we will now invite members of the audience to provide testimony. When called, please come forward and state your name and address for the record before proceeding with your testimony. When your name number is called, please indicate whether or not you'll be providing testimony. For those attending via Zoom, we will conduct a roll call to see who wants to provide testimony. And we will begin. Are there anyone in the audience who is a proponent of the proposal that would like to speak? All right. Please come up to the podium, please. Same drill as last time, name and address.
Marvin Inman, I live at 1654 West Aiken Avenue, Sisters. Question regarding the responsibility of developers. When they make a plan with the city, the trees are selected to stay and they're supposed to be cordoned off with fencing. And when trenching is being done, from what I understand, when I was in construction, you had to have an arborist to make sure you didn't damage the root system of the trees. And if it is damaged, does the developer have to pay this fee for damaging a significant tree during the course of their construction? If the homeowner is going to be responsible, will the developer? Because I've noticed a lot of trees being taken out at the development on 242 that, a lot of close digging alongside the trees out there on that easement. And if there wasn't an arborist there, did the tree get damaged and is it going to come down later? I'm looking at the responsibility across the board for, if it's going to be for one, it should be for everybody.
Do you feel comfortable answering that, or, this is more of just a public comment?
I can try to attempt to answer some of that. So we can, it's true, when we have a tree preservation plan, we require that trees be protected with the tree protection fencing. We can, it's not automatically a requirement to have an arborist available, but we can request in certain situations that they employ extra care, I guess, or with different techniques that the city arborist or another arborist could require that they employ. If it's like next to if they're doing work near a particularly big and sensitive tree, we can add some additional requirements on it, but it's not the norm, I guess. It would be a kind of an extra special requirement. Our code does allow us to kind of require that. Do have situations where developers they have trees that they know they have to remove, and then they have trees that they will try to protect, but they can't guarantee. And so sometimes they get close, they work close to those areas, those trees, and find out that the tree didn't make it. And so it's kind of like they could have, I guess, initially said that they couldn't save that tree and would have removed it, but they we're trying to make an effort to save them. In some cases, as you can see around town, we have sidewalks, curbs, things really close to trees that are doing just fine, or sidewalks go right around them. So I think there's been an effort by the developers in certain cases to save trees that maybe in the past they would have said, sorry, we're not going to save it. And then we would have probably just agreed with that. Would we find them in that situation? A lot of times they'll come and tell us that they've got a tree that they're working on that they tried to save that doesn't look like they're going to save, and so they kind of coordinate with us. And if they coordinate with us, we usually are kind of like, okay, we can see why that tree had to be removed. We might employ an arborist, the city arborist at that time, to get a second opinion to make sure that there's nothing else that can be done to save the tree. But there are those situations.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your question
The
or
other-
not.
One other question. In my development, I don't know if you had city arborists at the time, but I have 4 or 5 trees that are going to hit my eaves of my house, and they're not even 8 to 9 inches in diameter right now. Then it's going to be my responsibility to take these trees out when the development of that property should have been overseen by the city with some type of a restriction to have a tree that's going to be that close to a home. And I've seen it in the other developments over there also.
Hmm. Well, we do. We would in that situation if you propose to remove it. If it's obvious hazard, we have criteria in our code that we can approve removal of trees in that situation. Especially now with some of the changes where, if they are tied to defensible space as well. We can approve those. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else who's a proponent of the proposal? Online or in person? Okay, we will now hear from opponents of the proposal. One in the room or online? Okay, I see none. We will now hear from those with neutral testimony. Okay, I see none. We will now hear from those attending via Zoom. Okay, anyone else wishing to speak? Okay. All right, now it's time for questions of clarification. Does any member of the city council have any further questions of staff? Councilor Ross? No. Councilor McDougall, Councilor Frieden, and Councilor Pellerin?
I do not.
I do not as well. All right, we'll close the public hearing. If there are no further questions, I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing. The public testimony portion of the hearing is now closed. We have now closed the hearing and must deliberate towards a decision. Our options are to recommend A, approval as proposed, B, approval with changes, or C, denial. When your name is called, please provide your thoughts on the proposed amendments and what decision you are inclined to make. We'll continue going through the order until there are no further deliberations or until a motion is made. So you will have the opportunity to respond and or adjust your thoughts based on the testimony of your fellow counselors. Councilor Ross.
No, really, this topic was a work in the Urban Forestry Board for about 2 years. I mean, this did not happen overnight. A lot of work went into it. And it was triggered by some trees coming down in a development that upset a lot of people, including some of us. Related to your discussion, sir, we didn't discuss routes. I think that's something that can be bought at some point in time in the future to discuss how we might want to handle that too, especially as we look at urban growth boundary expansion and potential for redevelopment of areas that may have some significant trees in them. But this really was to take that first step to where the punitive results of taking a tree down to be able to sell a home more easily wasn't $500, which is the cost of doing business. It's now several $1,000s, which may require somebody, or force somebody to come in and have a discussion with Scott and his team about what they could do to try to keep that tree rather than cutting it down at 8 in the morning when no one's looking.
Thank you, Counselor McDougall.
Yeah, I agree. And I would have no changes to suggest.
Counselor Freedom?
I don't suggest any changes, although if I remember right, weren't we talking about $300 or $400 and we were kind of going back and forth about making it a little more expensive or a little less expensive? It seems like we had a lot of discussion about that price point. And I don't remember how it went, but I'm fine the way it is. And I think that we just need it. So yeah, as is.
All right, Counselor Pellerin.
I recommend the text as is.
Okay, and I feel the same way. Yeah, I really appreciate the Urban Forestry Board taking this on. This is not an easy thing to do, especially in the age of simultaneously really appreciating our trees in our community, and also knowing that some of them in some strategic locations are also a threat to our community. It's a really hard text amendment to work around, and it's a work in progress overall, for trees in our community, but I think this is a good step forward. And it also just invites, the opportunity. Really, it's not trying to be punitive, it's more getting the landowner to come and talk to city staff and see if there are other options. And I think that's really what we want. We just want to be able to make sure everybody knows that we provide that service, so. Okay.
Just one quick comment. You're correct. We did go back and forth on the amount. I was on the higher end. I think somewhere on the lower end. I think we reached the middle. I would have loved to have seen the value of the tree left in, but I could see why that was a little more than most people wanted to take on. And it also involved, if it's, how do you determine the value of the tree? If the city's street tree, we know what the value is. If it's a tree in a lot, yes, that's a harder thing to do. So we try to make this as clean as possible for the developer and for the landowner and the homeowner if they're not a developer. And so that's why we ended up.
Staff time. I think staff time was definitely a consideration.
And that's why we ended up with that amount, I'm in favor of it because I think we put this in, we see how it goes. This is the sort of an ordinary show you never have to use. This is the reality of it.
Let's hope.
Okay, what is the pleasure of the council? Do I have a motion?
I move to adopt the ordinance as presented. I don't have.
Oh. Yeah, there you go. There's your options.
I would like to take option 1. I move to approve City File TA 24-04 as drafted by staff. Thank you.
I second.
Okay. Great, thank you both.
Give it to Cheryl.
All right, any further deliberations? Going once, going twice? Okay, it is now time for a vote. We'll do a roll call vote. Counselor Predin.
Aye.
Counselor McDougall.
Aye.
Counselor Ross.
Oh, aye. I was going to say to Counselor Pellerin.
Counselor Pellerin.
Aye.
And Mayor Letts also says aye.
I means yes, right?
Yes.
Just clear it up.
I think so. All right, so now we're going to move into the ordinance procedure. This is a 2-phase process. So I'm going to ask for a motion to read the ordinance by title only.
Oh, I move to have the city manager read ordinance number 542 by title only.
541.
Oh, 541, sorry. Scroll down too far.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, state the motion has been made and seconded. The vote will be to read by title only. All in favor? Aye.
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 All right.
The motion carries, and city manager will read the ordinance by title.
Number 541, an ordinance of the City of Sisters amending Sisters Development Code, Section 3.2.500, landscaping and screening existing trees to add a base fine for unauthorized significant tree removal.
Okay, now I'm going to ask for a motion to approve and adopt the ordinance.
I move to approve and adopt ordinance number 541.
I second.
Okay, it has, there's been a motion and a second. We're gonna do another roll call vote. Counselor Pellerin,
Aye.
Counselor Frieden,
Yes.
Counselor McDougall,
Aye.
Counselor Ross,
Yes.
and I I will say aye, just to mix it up. All right,
Thanks again to the Forestry Board for
Yes.
seeing it through, and Planning Commission did it twice, I know, so.
Yeah.
And we did it 2 or 3 times. So.
yeah, well, the motion carries. And yes, thank you to everyone involved, staff, and all of our community members that helped put this together.
Look at that, your first ordinance. Look at
Oh,
that.
yeah, high fives. Hey, thank you. They made it easy. They all made it easy.
Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you. Well, if you like that,
Get another one.
you get another one. All right, so we have a public hearing for ordinance 542. And Emmy Shoup will be guiding us through this process. So I'm going to open the public hearing. Do I need to gavel for that? Or, okay, well, fun, yeah. Why not? Staff comment and report. City manager reads any revisions from the posted ordinance.
I don't believe, there
Oh.
wasn't any revisions, no.
Okay, then it's staff comments and report.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Emmy Shoup. I'm the associate planner here with the Community Development Department. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight to talk about the possibility of creating a SDC deferral program in Sisters to be available potentially for affordable and workforce housing developments. We last met on this topic on, I think, January 22nd, around 3 weeks ago. And I just wanted to give a really high-level overview of what we talked about then, starting with system development charges, which you might hear me refer to as SDCs as well, are one-time charges on new developments, and they help pay for the infrastructure needed to support that new development. And these fees are due prior to that development receiving their building permits or otherwise connecting to infrastructure when permits don't apply. However, over time, staff has received requests from developers, especially affordable housing developers, for the option to defer payment of SDCs. And why they might be requesting for deferrals is that allowing for SDC deferrals can help housing developers, especially affordable housing developers, to save money that would otherwise be used to finance the payment of those SDCs. And that can be helpful because it reduces the cost early on in the project, which can help make affordable housing projects more financially viable. So when we discussed this subject a few weeks ago, I came to you with a preliminary overview of what that SDC deferral program could be and what that ordinance language or what that process would have to be to make that happen. Because currently our Sisters Municipal Code, Chapter 13.25, does not allow for deferral of SDCs. So we discussed what that program could be, and I got your direction to expand the program to be applicable to also workforce housing in addition to affordable housing. So that expands the AMI threshold of what would be an affordable rate for housing up to 150% area median income, or AMI. You guys also provided guidance to allow developers to lock in the current SDC rates, and they would be able to benefit from those lower SDC rates for up to 2 years. And the last item I remember getting direction on is to not impose additional fees, such as to recover that lost interest that we would lose over that 2-year period. So I would like to start tonight presenting the ordinance 542, which is the code amendments to chapter 13.25 system development charges. The primary code amendment that we are bringing to you tonight is to allow for the creation of SDC deferral programs. I'm going to check my notes real quick, but as far as I can remember, that would be section 13.25.090. So we're removing the section delinquent charges and replacing it with the deferral of system development charges language, which basically states that the council has the ability to allow for deferral programs via adoption of resolution. There are also some other code cleanup amendments that are in this ordinance which support the existence of a potential deferral program, as well as other language that incorporate best practices, bring our code in accordance with state law, and otherwise update terms and definitions to what our current city practices are. Any questions?
I read this one over. It was very meaty, lots of red line in it, and I thought they're doing a lot of cleanup of the code with this one. So I'm glad to hear you say that, because I thought, huh? What's it good? Anyway. Did we, in our discussion on that 2-year timeline, we talked about that for developers, builders of single-family homes. Did we talk about a longer period of time for someone who was looking like at multifamily housing, like an apartment or something like that, that might take more than the 2 years to put up? Or did we decide 2 years was enough? I can't recall the discussion. That's an honest question.
I don't feel like we talked about the time frame, but I don't feel like we talked about the potential for longer because some projects just are innately longer. So I think that was not I don't think we talked through it. We can.
I think that's a great question, and there might be more opportunity to kind of dig into those details when we bring up the resolution, which is the next agenda item.
Because we would, if we put that in the resolution, it could be changed without having to go through the code process that we're going through right now. Is that not accurate?
From my understanding, that two-year period is not acknowledged anywhere in the code. We kind of get to make it whatever we want it to be via resolution.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping, that
Okay.
we could have that kind of number embedded in the code, because who wants to go back through the whole process, the hearing, change one number?
Great point. Any other questions?
No, I appreciate you laying out here the potential lost revenue for some of the different examples. That was helpful.
Great.
Councilor Pellerin, do you have any questions?
I do not, thank you.
I've had a couple of questions here that I scribbled. I'm trying to read my writing again. With the 2-year concept, is that maximum 2 years or certificate of occupancy, whichever comes first?
Yeah, I'm happy to just kind of briefly address that. So the two-year duration may come up or may occur prior to a building getting an occupancy permit or being ready for occupancy. So yeah, whichever comes first.
Okay. Because normally somebody would pay their SDCs at the time of pulling building permits.
Correct.
Right. So they're, no matter the project, they're kind of ready to go at that point. Ish.
At that 2-year point, is that what
No,
you mean?
when
Or?
they're pulling the building permit.
Oh, yeah, they're pretty well invested into it, and
Okay.
I would assume ready to
Yeah.
go.
Well, I know some things might take longer than that. I think most things would.
Yeah, I think
Make that mark.
the biggest point is STCs are a big number, the bigger the project, obviously, so it really helps out on the larger projects.
And, oh, I did have one question on the examples for, potential lost interest to the city, and we're using the 2% interest rate. Is there a reason why we're using 2%?
From my recollection, 2% is a pretty, I'm gonna use the word conservative rate. I've heard there's times where it's been as much as 8% interest rate or less than 2%. So it could range.
Okay.
Maybe there's a nod over my shoulder. Okay.
Somebody like spreadsheets. Okay, thank you. And how much of an impact to staff time administratively do you think that this might have, since we seem to not, be going down the road of charging for that time?
I will say that administrative time is built into our SDC fee methodology. So we do have some, I don't know, funding to kind of pay for the time that we put into administering SDC payments. It just means that this is going to be deferred to a later point. It is highly likely that there is an additional burden and time spent into administering the deferral agreements, creating those agreements, because they might be unique to each development. I didn't think about what that exact number is. I know that City of Veneta offered 7 hours per deferral agreement, which I don't think sounds absurd.
Yeah, there might be some legal costs associated with reviewing the deferral agreements and recorded instruments and things like that, especially as we set up those forms and agreements. So the initial ones might take a little more effort, and then as we get more of these applications and agreements. But remember, this is for workforce and affordable housing, which we only have 2 in the pipeline at this point. And I've only had a handful over the years. We hope to have more in the coming years, but it's not something that every project would be eligible for anyways.
And again, this is touched on in the resolution, but there is an opportunity for, if it's the same developer of several lots, we could only have to process one deferral agreement for several lots. If that developer can get all the property owner signatures, if it's not just the one person.
Okay. And then we're using the 150% AMI as the cap, and that's household,
Correct.
not just individual? Okay. And yeah, factoring 30% of their income with a 20% down, kind of based on those numbers. Okay. Any other questions? Anyone, clarifications? So ultimately, what we're kind of doing is using our flexibility as a city. That I think what's nice about this is that we don't, SDCs will be paid. Developer will get over the long run a little break on the SDCs if we're considering that there's normal rates of inflation and interest and things like that. So and just for reference for community, what we were provided for in the staff report here as an example was single family detached home is approximately about $19,000 total SDCs right now. So if that was deferred for 2 years at 2% interest rate, that would be $762 of potential savings. And then obviously, if we're looking at a multifamily 40-unit apartment building, for instance, that SDC fee could be $271,000 upfront, and so being able to push that back a couple years. The city potentially takes around $11,000 hit in just earned interest if that money was sitting in an account. But gives obviously builders, homeowners a little bit more flexibility in getting more affordable projects built. Okay. If there are no more questions.
Back to the script.
Back to the script, yes. It's time for public comments. Here we go, right here.
We'll give you a chair.
Yeah, we should just giving you the microphone.
Marvin Inman, 1654 West Aitken Avenue, Sisters. On the deferral charges, to guarantee payment, can you do a construction bond to guarantee that's going to be paid off? And I would recommend a higher interest rate. I mean, I think that's only reasonable. If our taxpayer money is paying for it, we're not getting our money's worth on loaning money to a developer for 2 years for him to use. And then how does that affect Habitat Homes? Do you charge those fees to the Habitat developer?
Yeah, they're one of our affordable homes builders, so yeah. I mean,
So that will change for them also.
A point of clarity,
No.
sir. The interest rate that was being discussed in the ordinance is the amount of money that city would lose was based on a 2% interest if that money were in the bank. We're not loaning the money to the developer.
Right.
2% rate. Now, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but you're giving him his money for 2 years.
But
And if you use a construction bond, you're guaranteed to get that money.
well, they won't get a certificate of occupancy without the money, which means they can't sell the home.
No, true. Okay.
And in a discussion earlier with Habitat, because of their structure, they do pay SDCs, but this program does not necessarily benefit the organization because of, I can't remember why, but he's nodding his head in the back, so. But he'll happy to talk to you afterwards, I think.
Okay. And then workforce housing, what's the definition of that?
80 to 150. Is that right?
It's up to 150.
Yeah, workforce housing is housing that's affordable to households that make 80% of the area median income at the bottom threshold, and then up to 150% area median income. And that affordable rate cannot be more than 30% of their household
So
income.
that's considered a rental?
It can be a rental or a for sale unit.
Okay.
For example, right now, off the top of my head, HUD's 80% AMI threshold for a household of 4 is $84,000, maybe almost $85,000. So that would be the lower end of workforce housing.
In a workforce housing, if someone applies for, who's going to manage that? Is that going to be an organization, or is it going to be the developer that controls the operation of the workforce housing?
The way that this, so we have the ordinance that's we're talking about now, but we also have a resolution that'll come up next. And the way that that program has been structured is that only deed restricted housing developments would be eligible for deferral of SDC. So there's kind of some more legal teeth involved in making sure that it's managed and regulated at that affordable rate.
Yeah, because if it's a rental, there's property taxes going to be paid on that. And if you have an employee, well, if you have a renter that comes into Sisters and rents all the homes and doesn't have any kids in school, then what is the benefit of having workforce housing for people who live here in Sisters if they get aced out because they missed the qualification or someone else beats them out for the home? What benefit to Sisters is workforce housing?
Anyone?
We're kind of getting into the weeds here. And, these are, I thank you for your comments.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, staff's certainly available to
Okay.
discuss these
All
as
right.
well, but, for the most part, there are a lot of, measures in place to kind of, address these issues and, usually just falls into the rental category. However, if a lot of these units, if they're sold, then, it's just kind of that one-time selling price and market takes over after that. So,
Okay.
yeah. have
Thank
any
you.
Comments? Thank you. Is there any other comments? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Morgan.
Thank you, Mayor Lutz. Council, my name is Morgan Greenwood. I'm the Vice President of Government Affairs with Central Oregon Builders Association. I just wanted to thank you all for considering the adoption of Ordinance 542 this evening. The deferral of systems development charges, in particular for affordable and workforce housing, is a crucial tool in my members' ability to meet Sisters' housing need. It is no secret that unfortunately we are on the precipice of a period of economic uncertainty, in particular as it pertains to the cost of both labor and materials, as well as the availability of both. And so providing this flexibility will be a great tool to ensure that housing developments that are already in the pipeline are able to continue on over the next few years. If I may, Councilor Ross, the question regarding a potential extension, I would just like to request that council consider the possibility of an additional 2-year extension once a deferral agreement has been entered into. So for a total of 4 years, but not a guarantee of 4 years. And I will be available for the rest of the hearing if any other questions arise, but thank you very much.
All right, anybody, any other public comments? Okay, I am going to close the public hearing. Council deliberations can begin. Any other thoughts of anything that was brought up or questions?
Put a hold for a second.
Okay, Councilor Pellerin, you can jump in anytime.
Yeah, did I hear correctly that Habitat for Humanity could not exercise this deferral program if implemented?
I don't think there's, we'll hear some public comment, have the opportunity for public comment, but I don't think there's anything that would preclude them from taking advantage of the program. They just may not be needing it or interested in it for different reasons, but they would meet all the income restrictions in their units. So, but it'd be interesting to hear from them in public comment if they have any comments at the appropriate time.
Yeah, we did close the public hearing.
I think it's how their funding works is on a reimbursement basis. And so the deferral doesn't really matter for them because they're getting reimbursed for those SEC costs.
Through our grant program. Yeah, they were awarded the Affordable Housing Grant Fund funds as well as the workforce housing funds that they could elect to use for payment of their SDCs. So they're.
That's also how the LIFT funding with the state works too. Yeah.
But I know we have developers that are interested in looking at both affordable and workforce housing as we look at UGB expansion opportunities. And that's really what we're talking about, is trying to make it pencil out a little bit more at the beginning. I don't have an answer to the comment about an additional 2 years. I'm very uncomfortable with that. I think we'd have to have some more discussion as a council and a staff about what that would mean, and if there would have to be some kind of an interest that would have to kick in at that time or something, because realistically, the city has paid for those infrastructure upgrades at the time that the building starts. And so I'd have to see a lot more and have more discussion on that before I'd be willing to do anything with that tonight.
Isn't that more of a resolution item?
I think it's a resolution. That's what's going to go next. I think it's a resolution item anyway. And so that's something that would be easy to have a discussion about. Really what we're talking about is, do we allow SDC deferrals? And if so, how and what?
And, you know, I'd just like to say, this is a little bit like, I kind of view it like short-term rentals. You come up with something and then, you know, a couple years down the road, if something's not working or it's not robust enough, or if it's too meaty, whatever, we can always adjust it a little later. We're just now creating the code, right? So we're just now making it allowable, and then we can fine tune later.
And I would add the comment that when you look at this particular document and the amount of red line that was in it, you realize that there's an awful lot of work for staff when they touch a piece of code that already exists, because going through the public hearing process is the opportunity to bring the code up to the current standards and things like that, which is something normally this staff of this size does not have the time to do.
Or is hard pressed to do.
Yes, hard pressed to do. Yeah, in any matter. Yeah.
You got a twofer, which is great.
Yep. Okay. Sorry.
Any other comments or deliberation material? Okay. So I will ask for a motion to read by title only.
I move to have the city manager read ordinance number 542 by title only.
Second.
All right, state the motion. Oh, sorry. The motion has been made and seconded, and vote to be read by title only.
This is ordinance number 542 and ordinance. Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
We only have, one more meeting left. Roll call or just regular vote? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All right, now I'll read
Hit
ordinance
it.
number 542. An ordinance of the
Keep
City
moving,
of
will you?
Sisters amending Sisters Municipal Code, Chapter 13.25, System Development Charges to allow for deferral programs, adopt provisions of state law, update collection requirements, revise enforcement provisions, and make other amendments.
Good job.
All right, now, do I have a motion to approve and adopt the ordinance?
I move to approve and adopt ordinance number 542.
Second.
All right, the motion has been made and seconded, so we're now going to do a roll call. Counselor Pellerin,
Aye.
Counselor Ross,
Aye.
Counselor McDougal,
Aye.
Counselor Breeden,
You betcha.
and I also say aye. So the motion carries.
Yay.
All right, and thank you. And then now we have a resolution.
Yes.
Okay. Back to Amy Shu.
All right. Well, I'm just going to continue on with my presentation. I've moved on to the slide that's about Resolution 2025-01. This is a resolution that proposes to create an SDC deferral program for certain affordable and workforce housing developments. This resolution kind of follows on the, the coattails of ordinance 542, which creates the ability for council to adopt deferral programs via resolution. So this resolution here outlines the eligibility criteria for what kind of housing developments would be allowed to defer their SDCs. In this case, it would be developers of deed restricted housing that will be available at affordable rates for households making less than 150% AMI. That includes affordable and workforce housing according to the city's definitions. This resolution also includes the timing parameters and the procedures for administering those deferral agreements, including that those SDCs can be locked in at that initial rate when the deferral agreement is signed and recorded. They get that rate for up to 2 years or prior to receiving their occupancy permit, whichever occurs first. And the city will create the deferral agreement and work with that developer to get signatures and record it prior to those permits being issued. And once those SDCs that were deferred are paid, we will release that agreement. Any questions?
No questions. I'm in agreement with Councilor Ross that I would rather not change the timeline at this point from 2 years, but keep that in consideration for a potential change. I'd like to see the program go into use first and see if we have some examples of, why we would want to do that, and then also what the ramifications would be with, financial ramifications of potential, the 2 to 4 years. I'd like to put that off to another discussion.
Sure. And if I can just chime in here, I'm pretty sure that our deferral program, the way that it's written, if that 2-year window comes up, I think they would be able to enter a new deferral agreement, which could extend it for another 2 years. Granted, we have to be okay with that, but then they have to come in.
Provision are you looking at?
Hold on. Okay, I probably should find that first. But that means they don't get that 4-year-old rate. They get the current rate for another 2 years. So I should probably pinpoint that.
Well, let me, in the point of making the water muddier, assuming that that new application on that particular permit is possible, you're saying that the SDC rates would go to the rates in effect at the time of the request of the renewal.
Correct. If that is possible, if I'm able to pinpoint that.
We do I don't know if Garrett, you're still on the call or not. If you could, Garrett Krostek helped us craft this. And Garrett, do you have any thoughts on whether this agreement, the way it's written currently, would allow for the possibility of a 2-year extension or not?
No, we didn't build in a 2-year, or well, we didn't build in any renewals or sort of a reset. Maybe what you're thinking of, Emmy, is that there is a provision about getting out of your deed restrictions early, but one of the things you might have to do that is to supply an alternative form of affordable or workforce housing with a renewed term of affordability, but there's nothing about extending the deferral amount.
Thank you for that, Garrett.
I had just a clarification. How often do we look at SDC rates and readjust them? Is that like every 2 years or 3?
They typically are indexed every year to the construction cost index.
Okay.
And that can range between 0 to high inflation, 8%. And it's based off the ENR index based out of Seattle, I believe, Portland. And then on top of that, if we do update like a master plan, like a water, wastewater, park master plan, like we've done recently, we'll look at the methodology and perhaps do an adjustment there. We just did that last year for water and sewer.
Yeah, and I just want to add to this. This is a hard one for me because I'm not a big fan of deferring SDCs on anything. Having been involved with SDCs and methodology for several years, and I see the benefit it has to the community. And so I want to say to the staff that are affected by this that I appreciate your willingness to go along with it, because I think this is a tool we're trying to use to see if we can get this market going and moving faster than it has, especially as we bring land in. But I'm certainly, during the time I'm on this council, going to keep a close eye on it and be sure that it's doing what we want it to do. And if it isn't, then sunsetting it or whatever we need to do, at least the resolution component of it. So just needed to get that in there.
All right, anyone else? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the resolution? Yeah.
I move to approve resolution -2025-01. Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Roll call or just good old normal I one? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It'd be the first resolution of 2025.
I know, I'm so happy. The first one is regarding affordable and workforce housing.
Yeah, good job. All right, well, thank you again. And I know this was a lot of hard work, and I love the fact that we got some code cleanup in the process too. So that was.
Well, we'll thank Garrett for that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Garrett.
It was great.
Yeah, all right.
Well, I just wanted to say that following the adoption of Ordinance 542 and sounds like with the adoption of Resolution 2025-01 on today, February 12th, 2025, the SDC deferral program would be effective on, I think, March 12th. So 30 days.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, we should have declared an emergency. We could have put it right in. Oh, well.
All right.
Missed opportunity.
Section 4 might actually have, they can reapply. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Next on our agenda is to approve the grant agreement with Trinity Place. And City Manager Wheeler will walk us through this one.
Thank you, Mayor. I have the pleasure tonight to present to you the grant agreement with Trinity Place LLC that was awarded the grant. It was actually Northwest Housing Alternatives, and Clayton from Northwest Housing Alternatives is here tonight as well. If there's any questions that come up about the development or the grant, I'm sure he would love to chime in. But As you recall, this would be the grant for the $500,000 in ARPA funds that the city and the county an agreement for the county to send to the city, which they did a few years ago, actually, the $500,000 that are dedicated for affordable housing projects in the city of Sisters. So that's already been dispersed, and earlier tonight, there was an item to amend that agreement, a small amendment that the county had already approved that changed a term in that agreement from the 65% to 80% AMI. So we've been working with Northwest Housing Alternatives and Trinity Place on this grant agreement over the last few years, and during that time, they've been working on their development. They secured the property. The property has got approval for the partition. They submitted for land use, and the land use application has been approved. And I think the appeal period ends on the 19th, if I'm not mistaken. And so this project, as I think everyone's well aware, is a 40-unit affordable housing project for households that would make 80% or less of the area median income. The agreement outlines sort of the requirements for the development, outlines that there will be a blend of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. The project also includes a community space and outdoor play area as part of that development. And the project must be completed by the end of 2026. And that's actually a provision of the American Rescue Plan Act funds that they need to be, the projects that are funded by the ARPA funds need to be complete by the end of 2026. So it's been a long road. This grant agreement has been gone through a period of back and forth between attorneys and city staff and Northwest Housing. And I just would like to thank Clayton and his team. Trinity Place have been a good partner in this. And we're excited to see this project get up and out of the ground. So with that, I'll ask for the council to approve the grant agreement tonight.
All right, does anybody have any questions or any discussion?
I think just a comment, I appreciate your sticking with us through this process. It's frustrating for me because I thought we'd already have some stuff up, but that's not how all this works. So it looks like we're just about ready to be able to start to see some progress, real progress in terms of having someplace for folks to be able to live that fall into this particular category, and we know we have a dearth of that housing here.
Do we have any idea when you're going to start if this gets approved tonight?
So Clayton Crowhurst, Northwest Housing Alternatives, we're the sole managing member of Trinity Place LLC. So with this grant agreement being approved, it gets us, I would say we're on the financing end about 2 steps away from having all of our budget filled. And so this kind of gets us into that, let's say 5 yards to goal line position. I'm shooting for construction start this summer if we can tie up all of our financing. I've been given a drop dead deadline to hit the 2026 from our GC of, believe, beginning of October is when we need to start construction. I'm just as eager and anxious and right back at you, Councilor Ross, in terms of I appreciate y'all sticking with us through this process as well. I think everybody has watched construction costs go up over the last 4 years, and this project is not immune to any of that. So, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Order all your Canadian lumber next week.
Yes. And I would, just while I'm up here, I would like to give special recognition to Scott and especially Emmy. Emmy has been a pleasure to work with. I've never had a planner that has had such good communication throughout the land use process. Several instances of either sending citizen questions to me to be able to respond to, keeping me up to date on timelines. So I just want to give a huge shout out to that team. They've been a real pleasure to work with.
And a great council. Come on.
Yes.
Yeah. No, we've been working hard at this for a long time now, right? We've been to a lot of meetings together and, just making it happen. So
Yep.
Thanks for continuing to do so.
Yeah, for the historic perspective, the, council came together on this project early in the city and the city to, you know, basically pay for the zone change that was needed for this project to occur. You know, also finding the partner to offer up the land for the project to be sold. That was a lot of work on city staff and council a few years ago. So a lot of people have leaned in on this and then are, you know, excited to see it come out of the ground.
Ready for the dust to fly. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, we are.
Same here.
We're all polishing the giant scissors, right?
And that's, I think as the city is actually officially the grantee for that, and then we're a subrecipient. So those are, and I think we've at least seen some amount of assurances that ARPA funds are not being touched. I've also personally got just way more stuff to worry about as it is. So it's not one I'm going to add to my list of things to worry about.
Okay, Counselor Pellerin, sorry, we had a little technical difficulty there. Did you have any comments or questions?
I do not.
Okay. Then I will look for a motion.
Great. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
I move to approve an affordable housing grant agreement with Trinity Place LLC in the amount of $500,000 to construct 40 affordable residential housing units and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement.
A second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Right, the motion passes. Thank you.
That was real sweat. That was a real sweat, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was worried.
Okay, moving on to other business. City Manager Jordan Wheeler would like to do a response to some prior meeting public comments. And then we can move on to some staff comments.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a kind of a new addition to the agenda. Instead of sort of having you know, during the city council comments at the end of the meeting, we thought just putting something on the agenda that will be responding to public comments at the next meeting, especially if there's a question or some research that needs to be done, or council direct staff to look into it, we can come back and report to you, you know, what we found or what the response is from the city. So there was a couple public comments at the last meeting, so I'll just address a couple things. There was a request about the use of City Hall for meeting space. This has come up a few times in this last year, especially in the last few weeks. Our policy since COVID has been the council chambers is not an appropriate community meeting space for a variety of reasons. It's pretty much a policy you see a lot of places. Council chambers have a lot of technology. They're often used at night for board and commission meetings, or, you know, they're more designed for city council, for municipal court, for board and commission, or city meetings that involve staff and city council. We host, you know, council coffees here and open houses and things like that. Technology is a concern. Computers, things like that are left in this room. It's hard to log off. On the other hand, Sisters is fortunate to have a lot of community meeting spaces, and there's been a lot of talk and sort of coordination amongst other groups like C4C, SPRD, you know, the library, the fire district. They all have community rooms that could be used for community groups to meet there. That's sort of what they're designed and intended for. You know, they're publicly funded spaces, the library, the fire district, the new community center that will have that do have meeting rooms. And then also I think the new ranger station will have a public meeting space rather large for the public to use as well. And it's also our understanding that C4C is putting together a list or is working on a list where members of the public and private groups can find public and private meeting spaces within town. So that, if council agrees, that's sort of our policy that we're communicating, and we're happy to help people and help direct them where they can find resources to find an affordable meeting space.
Only other issue is also in the, since the beginning of COVID, we've added a few staff members as well. And, the workload has kind of gone up with that as well. So the need, some of the staff members had to use some of our other meeting spaces as office spaces. So it really has put a crunch on like this space. This space is getting utilized just by city staff and committees way more than it was just even a handful of years ago. So.
Yeah.
And I want to make a comment, having run buildings with meeting space, a number of them. Until we decide as a city to change out the methodology of egress and ingress to this building, i.e. eliminating keys and going to some kind of a keypad system and mag card or something like that, which tracks who's coming and going, when they're coming and going. I'm very reluctant to give a key to anyone to this building, because while everyone, I believe, the OASIS means well and does well, you start losing control of keys. And I have had schools that I ran where there were probably 200 keys out somewhere in the community. We had no clue where they were. And so just over the years, they just, somebody retires, quits, leaves, key stays in their pocket. So I think that that's part of the issue to me as a city councilor from the security perspective, and just make sure our staff is safe and our building is safe. Is that until we do something different in terms of how we provide ingress and access from this building and being able to track who's in here and when they're in here, that means we've got to have a staff member here. And so I'm comfortable with what you just said.
Great. Thank you.
Manager.
And then another comment was about pedestrian safety, in particular requests for ODOT to install rapid yellow flashing crosswalk signs. I sort of addressed this at the 2 weeks ago, but we are meeting with ODOT later this month. I'll be meeting with the Region 4 manager, and this will be one of the topics. I think I mentioned at that meeting, we also will have our first flashing crosswalks signal coming, I think this summer, with the phase 3 of the Woodlands development. That's where Sisters Park Drive is going to be extended to Highway 20. So at that intersection, there's going to be a crossing, and that's going to have the rapid yellow flashing. So it'll be our first one on the highway. I think that's a good test case, but I think part of this conversation with ODOT then is where could there be other opportunities along the stretch within city limits that it would make sense for additional yellow crossings, flashing crossings. There's a technical name for those, but so that's the status of that, and we'll report out to council after that meeting. And I think that was it for the comments.
Good.
I think I'm up next.
Yeah, staff comment.
Yeah, this is kind of the stretch of the meeting where you get to listen to me talk for a while.
Yeah.
I'll bring staff back up at the next meeting, but I'll give the updates tonight. First request, so goal setting materials for next Thursday. So the city council will be doing their goal setting at the Sisters Makers building from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. We'll get the materials out to you this week. It'll be the open house comments, it'll be the online comments, it'll be the status on our current goals, and some notes and suggestions from staff on potential goals and project updates, the major projects and initiatives, white papers. So if you do have any goals that come to mind between now and then, feel free to send them my way, and I could distribute that out to council as well. I've captured a lot over our conversations and sort of, as the years have gone, as the year has gone on. But if you have goals you want to email me or write down, or next time we meet between now and then, I'm happy to kind of distribute those as we get close to that goal setting, just so you have all the information as you go into goal setting. Roundabout art. So we're getting closer and closer. Exciting news here. March 17th is the date that we're targeting for having the mock-ups here in City Hall available for view. So, you know, there's a couple finalists that have been selected by the committee. The next step is working with those artists on doing those mock-ups. And then now we get to the more of the public involvement process where people get to come and view and chime in on them. So
What was the date again?
March 17th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You've probably seen that CORE, our emergency cold weather shelter, has been activated for a number of days now with the cold weather. I think 10 days total so far, and they're scheduled to be open through tomorrow night. As the cold weather continues, I think we're finally going to get a little bit back to seasonal normals this weekend. The Civic Leadership Academy had an information gathering night last night. How many folks?
We first met with the old cohort, and then we had 4 people come that had already submitted applications, or at least I think 3 had submitted applications. One was maybe Sarah.
I talked to 3 people, but that was way into the time. So yeah.
I think we have 12 applications so far for this next cohort. A little bit of administrative stuff. I think we talked about this during budget, but we have moved forward and we have a new phone system finally. I think our phone system was from the mid 2006, 7 or something in that. So staff are very pleased that we have modern equipment that actually we get voicemail to email. It's all cloud-based. It's a Zoom phone platform. So staff have both the physical phones, but also it's virtual as well. So kind of fun going through the adjustment on that, but a lot of new features and modern technology that we can use to have better service for our citizens.
Like your laptop can ring in the middle of a meeting?
That happened today, yes.
A laptop ringing. It was pretty fun.
You saw from our EDCO coordinator that Sherm Bloomer, the dean at OSU Cascades, will be coming to the Sisters Economic Development Committee, and you all are invited. I think that's next Thursday. It's right after our goal setting, so if you're interested in staying there and helping set up the room for the next meeting, I think it's that afternoon. Okay, so Barkley, we're getting close, weather permitting. I think we're starting in early April is when the contractor is going to be mobilizing on that. There's a pre-construction meeting starting, I think, happening tomorrow. So things are moving ahead. You know, we'll see how the winter. You know, I know groundhog did see their shadow, so winter may go on. But both with Barkley getting going, we also have East Portal that. They're eager to finish that work. So again, weather permitting and, you know, things thawing out, they'll be getting back in there. I think they've been doing electrical work, but this spring, that'll be complete. And I think over spring break, we still have the McKinney Butte project that will be finishing up too. So we're springtime, things will be happening pretty fast. We got additional fuel reduction scoping work that's happening with the wastewater treatment plant. There's a buffer strip over there that we're looking at doing some cleanup work. And I think Public Works has been working with the Forest Service on partnering on a prescribed burn with that material. So this is just stuff that's going to be ongoing. But I think it's just important to kind of communicate that we're continuing to do, you know, wildfire mitigation stuff on our own public property and cleaning up the forest and making it more fire resilient. And now kind of switching gears and more planning related stuff. Woodlands Phase 3, I think earlier, no, that's Sunset Meadows. So Woodland Phase 3, I mentioned the yellow crossing signal as part of that phase. Phase 3 had their pre-construction meeting, so all the kind of utility work and everything is going to go into this next phase of the development, including major street connections like Sister Park Drive, will be happening with Phase 3. The other part of this Phase 3 that you know, on the development side will be some multifamily, I believe, is in that, but additional cottages, townhomes, and you know, the extension of the roadway onto Highway 20. So more work possibly happening on that project this summer. And then on Sunset Meadows, you accepted the the public improvements for 3 and 4. So building permits will probably start commencing for that portion of the project. I think there's already 10 that have come in for that phase. And then on the apartment building side, which I think is called the Grove apartments, those you've probably seen the advertisement for those. They have a couple certificate of occupancies already issued for that. And then the other, I think 4 buildings. So there's 2 that are issued and then 4 more. So there's 6 in total will be issued pretty soon. So those are looking to get leased up. There's several other land use applications that are under review. The folks across the street here, the community park, they have submitted for site plan, so that's under review. So their site plan for the new pickleball courts and the ball fields and playground has been submitted. And then there's a couple other projects that have a site plan review underway right now on Westview Loop, including attached units that would be for overnight lodging. And another one on Westview that would be for overnight lodging and residential units. So that, if you know where Westside, the Westview Loop is, it's that little racetrack development over by Pine Meadow Village.
It's that
Kind of by
building
Les
that's under
Schwab.
construction on, at the end of Hood,
Yeah.
that little neighborhood called Westview Loop.
And then we also have a request for proposals out right now for the Northwest Park Master Plan. That closes on the 20th. And we do have some interest from landscape architect firms. And if you remember the budget for that, it's about $100,000. We do have a state grant that we received to help support that work. So we hope to kick that off this spring after we get the consultant on board, and that contract will come in front of you guys after we've selected the consultant. And then you may have seen, I believe the survey has gone out on the renaming of the East Portal.
Yes.
And we already have 150 responses so far. And it's one of those surveys where it's like, do you like it? Do you don't like it on a scale of 1 to 5? But I think there's like 5 or 6 different name possibilities that have been kind of floated out there by the Parks Board. So that process is happening for our transportation hub and a mobility hub.
Is there a name that's in the lead?
Not really. I looked into it a little bit today, and nothing, no clear. There's some that folks don't like. I could say that.
Yeah.
But there's definitely not a clear favorite so far. So encourage the
enough.
public to check it out.
Didn't expect you to be able to answer that, so. I'll give you an update later.
And I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Jordan or staff?
No, but you know what? They've been working hard.
They've been
I
working hard.
Appreciate all you guys. I'm looking
Definitely.
forward to some time off in the summer for everybody, at one time or another.
No time off. Well, they have those fancy
We took
fancy
away-
phones.
Yeah,
I know. We could,
Well, they have time off now because their phone follows them. So the
Yes.
Zoom phone has little wings on it,
Yeah.
follows them around. Rings on their laptop. In Antigua. That'd be all right.
all right, we're up for counselor business, and, well, we can do this 2 ways. I know we, a lot of us have talked about wanting to talk about the wildfire map issue, so we can kind of start with that, or we can start with our individual comments.
Why don't we start off with the
Dive into it?
the common theme.
Okay. Yeah, I know I have been getting a lot of emails in regards to the wildfire risk map from that ODF and OSU have put together that were directed with Senate Bill 762 to be created. And, I've been kind of working the messaging on my end, and I'm sure you've all received, emails, comments, from people inside and outside the city. And, it is a state process. We aren't directly involved. And, ultimately what happened was, partially, part of the city was rated high and part of it wasn't was rated moderate. And a lot of, I think the concern I'm hearing, which I think has a silver lining, is that most people are concerned. They understand the need for the work. They understand the need for the mitigation, which I think is great. But they have the concern over, is it going to make their insurance rates go up? And, are they going to lose property value over it? And also, I think just getting singled out. I think some people understand, your house is only as safe as the house next to it. And if,
I certainly understand.
if their neighbor is not, having to be held to the same standard, then it seems futile. So, yeah, so, I've seen different, I'm sure we've all seen different requests. Some people are saying, we should do something. There's not a lot we can do, but, when we had the public comment period on this in August, city council, signed a letter, all 5 of us at the time, and sent it in during the comment period, uh, to line out our concerns and basically the kind of the piecemealing of it, and that we understand that our fire danger here is high. Embers can travel miles ahead of a fire, and we're only 2 square miles, so cutting our town in half doesn't seem to provide us the tools we needed. And so we did submit a letter, with some with some solutions. We didn't want to just complain. We offered some solutions to the situation. It doesn't seem like they really considered that in the process, unfortunately, but it felt good that we did that at least. So so I think we have some options on the table. One is, that was brought up earlier in the evening, submitting a letter. One option is to ODF. One option that Mr. Luftig had referenced earlier in the evening was to send it to Senator Golden, since he is kind of the person in the State House who seems to be working on the most fire-related bills. He's out of Ashland, so he's very familiar with fire mitigation and fires in general. Those are a couple ideas, but yeah, anybody chime in with your experiences or suggestions of what we could do?
I realize that it's probably somewhat futile to send a letter, but I also think that it's necessary for us to do so. I think that we can't sit on our hands and say that the state's not going to listen to us. This is one of those sorts of things where I'm not convinced we're going to have a lot of influence on this particular thing. And I think probably trying to work with Senator Golden and the folks that are lining up with him may give us more options and opportunities in the long run. I think one of his objections when looking at it was parts of the Medford Ashland Talon area that burned to the ground was so rated as high fire risk that there was nothing left, which kind of shows the inadequacy of the mapping structure that was used. So, yeah, I'm in favor of sending a letter asking that we, I think what it is, but use the newer maps minimally and apply them as an overlay rather than on a lot by lot basis. I'm not sure how much help that will be, but I think that to sit here and say, well, we can't do anything, let's not do it. I don't think that's fair to the constituency of this community.
Yeah, I've been fighting with this a lot because, you want to go in there and just start ripping heads off, but at the same time, that doesn't get you anywhere. And then you can't do nothing. So you got to kind of hit what's in the middle, right? I kind of look at this issue a little bit like I look at the water issue, which is you got a bunch of people at the state that create all the maps and they have all that stuff and all that. Well, nobody knows sisters more than we do. Just like Central Oregon knows the water situation as well and can manage some of that on their own, not totally on their own. I'm not saying cut the state out or anything like that, but there's got to be a way, and there should be a way, I think, that we have some autonomy as a city to say, look, we're all in this together. This city limits is we're the elected officials. Here's what we want to do as a group. Can you help us do that? Now, I don't know what that is other than what we're already trying to do, which is building hardening and resilience and mitigation and all that stuff. And so I don't know kind of what this letter is going to look like, but I think we should do it because we can't, like you said, we can't do it, not do anything. I mean, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So whatever we do, we have to agree to what that is. What are we asking for? Make sure we all agree on that and then get it on out. I think we're under a really big time crunch because isn't there only like a 60-day appeal period? And I think it's half gone already. So we have to like kind of, I don't know the exact dates, but
I-
there are people going, there's people from, couple neighborhoods in town. I know Tollgate's gotten in contact with us. I know, some people from STA have gotten in contact, I feel like we have to do something fast. I just don't know exactly
I
what.
think the date,
it
by the way,
is.
is like the 2nd or 3rd of March.
It's March 10th.
Thank you.
Throw something in there, Cheryl. I know you got opinions too.
Yeah, this is a very, very active topic on social media. Several people, even outside of Sisters, just across Oregon, are sending in letters to their representatives. Responses have come back to follow the appeal process. Submit your appeal. Some requests were actually to repeal the actual Senate bill. But that includes a lot more than just the map. So that response was coming back as a, no, we're probably not going to do that. But it's very frustrating. I agree with our approach as a city that we're just going to, regardless of this map, we are all at high risk. And unfortunately, the concerns about insurance, I completely get, and I wonder that even without this map, whether the insurance would just continue to rise anyway. We're in a different climate, a different world now, and we're seeing the destruction of these wildfires and the impacts it's having on communities and including the insurance industry. Yeah, I just don't have, I just don't have an answer to this. It's a tough thing. I think in support of our community, though, a letter, if it's not going to require a lot of staff time, I want to ask who we'd be sending that to. I think you mentioned ODF, but would we send that as well to representatives?
Yeah, I think if we said, we're gonna do this, whatever that is, and I think it's in our goal setting, it's in what we've already been doing, and it's gonna continue in our goal setting. I think if we just send letters, here's what we're doing, can you help us out to make it so it's more effective with the insurance companies or whatever? The map is only one part of that, right? It's just one designator, and I just don't know what the solution is to somewhat minimize the map and accentuate what we're actually doing. Because I have to think in the long run, that'll help us. Even if we're saying, hey, we're high risk, we all know it, we're surrounded by forest, we're a tinderbox waiting to happen. There's only 4 cities in Central Oregon and Deschutes County, and 3 of them had major fires, and we were the one that did not, even though we're probably at the highest risk. So we're doing a lot of things right. We're also a little lucky, maybe. We do have 5 fire jurisdictions in our area: ODF, Cloverdale, Black Butte. They're all close enough. They all help out. We have some coverage. Ranger Station, obviously, in our own. It's not all fortune, though. I think we've been working hard at it for a number of years. I think we have the right people doing it. And, are there concerns about future budgets? Absolutely. But it's almost like it's a messaging thing. It's like, here's what we're doing. Help us out, I don't know what that is, but.
Yeah, I mean, we can pull examples all day long. I look at the map, I look at my house, what I'm rated, and I go, huh? And then I look at folks that have a lot less tree than I have, and look at their rating, and go, holy cow. All the work that was done out by the wastewater treatment plant, the mitigation, the mowing, and it's irrigated. High rent, it's at the top. I think the argument we've been hearing from a lot of folks is that the data in the particular order that was used, because it was several years older than more modern data, didn't reflect what's actually occurred. And there's no easy way to say that. They knew what they picked what they were going to use, and they decided what they were going to use, and they have their rationale. And you go ask OSU why they pulled that one up. I have no idea. But I'm at a point, I don't know what to say either, other than we somehow need to support our citizenry, and I sure wish I could wordsmith something like that, and I haven't got a dang clue, and that's not usual for me.
Do you have any comments?
I'm in a similar situation. I mean, I feel like if somebody here has an idea of what to do that shows that we support everybody who lives here, I want to do that. I don't have the answer as to what that would be. I mean, I think this, yeah, it's just very unfortunate. There's a lot of misunderstandings around this map, and you know, I think the impact that people are feeling, that they think it has to do with their insurance rates. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but I do think that probably the insurance industry has better data than this map. And that's not something I'm concerned with for myself, but when a map doesn't make sense, then it just makes you feel like, well, how are they going to use it against me? Because this isn't even correct. So
I'm concerned for myself. If my fire insurance at my little house went up 3 or 4 times, I would be hard pressed to be able to, you know, understand what I'm saying?
no, I'm not concerned that my insurance rates are tied to the map.
Yeah, I got
I'm
you.
concerned about insurance rates in general. But
I'm
I'm
just
not,
making sure.
like, you know, when I look at what's happening, I don't feel like it is a result of the map. I feel it's a result of data that my insurance company is analyzing and deciding, oh yeah, we need some more money.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna steal your thunder, so go ahead if you want. I was gonna talk about the meeting we had with Matt. We had a meeting early in the week, last week? Last week, yeah, with Matt Ramage, Ramage, who is with the Oregon Division of Financial Regulation, and they are sort of the ombudsman that deals with some of the things, including insurance. And an interesting part of that long discussion was the fact that he said the insurance agency, he worked in insurance. So he said, I kind of know the insurance companies have all kinds of data that they use. And frankly, this overlay map that everyone's worried about is they've got much better data than that, than what that map is based on. And he talked about rate increases. Mine's gone up 3 or 4 times, but he said they've been going up 3 or 4 times nationally, not just you know, here. And when you have insurance companies that suffer the kind of losses in Florida and Arkansas and the Carolinas and California, they're for-profit companies. And so they spread that cost across everybody.
Well, they legally can't in Oregon.
I know, but you better
I think
believe.
there's a couple of workarounds there, but there
Yeah.
are laws in Oregon that they can't adjust their rates based on national losses.
Right.
They can only be adjusted on Oregon losses,
And we're one of the few states that has that.
which in 2020 and 2024, we took massive losses, so.
The last thing I'll say is, Mayor, you're in this industry more than the rest of us. And, you know, I'm not trying to lean on you and put more pressure on you because that's your industry or anything like that. But at the same time, it's your industry, you know, it's kind of part of what you do. So, you know, I think that you have better answers than most people is all I can tell you.
I had the same thought, but I wasn't going to say it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking
Okay.
at Phil Chang's letter and, you know, that he sent out yesterday or whatever. And, you know, a lot of the answers are pretty good, but I know that you know these answers kind of off your shoulder without having to write it down, right?
Yeah, for the most part, there was a couple interesting things in there I can address. 3 things have come to mind in this really great discussion. One is I think we need to, you know, up our game in our public affairs work and getting the message out on what we are working on within the city. I know we've been talking about it a lot, and I think there's been some articles in the Nugget and things, but I think, you know, we have a lot of things going on in this arena. And so I think that there's some potential there to just get that message out better. Second is that in regards to, I did circle back to the gentleman with the Division of Financial Regulations of saying thank you that he met with us. And he did say that he did share, you know, our stories with his supervisors, but he did suggest that we directly communicate with his supervisor. So I think a letter to him would be great, because he was requesting that. He's like, it'd be great if the city actually, commuted directly with them. So I want to make sure that we follow up on that. And I almost forgot about that. So thanks for bringing that up. And then the third thing is that I think if a letter in general regarding the map is, I think we have two options. We could do one or both. The one about addressing, being involved in the appeals process is a little sticky, because we're not necessarily appealing. I mean, we can in the respect that the city owns property, and some of that was rated high, correct? Some of it, we own properties all over and outside the city as well. So, we can make some comments in regards to that as we can't make comments on behalf of anybody else, or we can't appeal on behalf of anybody else. It's part of the rules.
But we can comment. I mean, we can write a letter and just say,
Sure.
hey, within the
Right.
city limits of Citrus, here's
Sure.
what we think.
Well,
Sure.
like I said, we have a lot of properties that are high risk
Yeah.
that we own.
As
Yeah.
a city.
Yeah.
But I just mean, we're the elected officials. We can comment on what, we can comment.
Yeah. Yeah, it
about
doesn't
the city
necessarily
itself.
fall into that appeals process box, but,
Yeah.
we can do that. I mean, we can also just, regurgitate what was in our last letter. You know, if we want, I don't think any of those points have changed. And the second letter option, I think, is, what Mr. Liftig said earlier, I think was a good option as well, of just going to the, people in the State House.
Yeah.
Who are kind of actively working on solutions. I mean, there are, a part of me wants to wait a little bit of time to see what spits out of Salem, because this is a really hot topic, no pun intended, all across the state right now. So, however, there's nothing, I think there's a lot of value in just communicating, with Senator Golden, or if there's anybody else that's a key person. Obviously, I think CCing our local representatives, and but I think there's a lot of value in that as well, because we might be able to circumvent the process. Because there's one thing in Phil Chang's letter that some of us had seen that, and this was just an informative letter that he's been sending constituents that have been asking him about the issue and the appeals process. So one thing was about, funding or resources available to people in high, and so that is sticky, because it's like, well, I don't, I think the resources could be better used, citywide versus kind of doling them out to, certain property owners. So that's a trap I don't want to fall into. Because yeah, there's some options on the table. That's kind of the best that I could come up with, unless any of our city managers have any input.
I think everything you just said is probably appropriate. We have 7 properties that are within the high risk classification. Again, the criteria for appealing is pretty narrow, and it has to go towards, exactly what the criteria was in the map. And some of that we've already commented on, right, with the data sets that were used, that were dated. I think that's one of our neighborhood's primary concern. I think your position is that, regardless of the classification of the city, we're proceeding with things that would be implemented in all high-risk areas, with the defensible space standards that we're teeing up for adoption, and the building hardening, rules with the building code. I think our probably play is, we got a legislative session happening right now with a senator from Ashland that's very interested in this. And there's an amendment to Senate Bill 84, I think, that we're looking to have placed in there, so that we can kind of codify the ability to do the building hardening standard citywide. But then also kind of weighing in on some of I think the comment made tonight about Senator Golden's comments about the fire risk map, and maybe looking at the broader areas, like we had originally submitted in our letter about using the WUI, sort of areas, which, in mimicking that, or just using that to indicate where these, mitigation measures need to be placed. So perhaps working through our legislation, or our delegation, I think Cocoa Day is on March 20th. But in advance of that, we can send a letter. If some of these Senate bills like 84 and other wildfire measures come up, we have an opportunity to testify, and submit comments that way through the legislation. And I think what your public is asking for is like, just some advocacy on their behalf, just recognition that this has created some stress in the community of like, hey, I got listed as high. What does this mean? I have concerns. And I think they just want to be heard that, hey, we hear you and we're working on wildfire mitigation. It's our number one goal. We got a lot of irons in the fire, no pun intended for that. And oh, by the way, we're concerned about insurance too. And here's what we're working on with that. And that's working with the state on public education about it and what can and can't be done. And doing things like defensible spaces and building hardening can, in the long term, help you with insurance. And that's what we're trying to set our community up for. And I'm sure this will be a topic of goal setting. But I think maybe a letter to Senator Golden, and maybe there's a letter that we want to think about drafting that goes to just the, back to the forestry, repeating our.
I think we almost have two letters. Like one of them's like, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're, here's why,
Well, I think there's also the letter to Matt's boss. I mean, he really came in and had some interesting things to say.
Yeah.
And it sounds like because of the nature of that particular division within the state government, the chances are good that his supervisor has the ear of some people, probably someone in the governor's office or someone close to the governor's office, to be able to kind of to say, this is the impact this stuff's having in a community and what I've been talking to people out in the field about. And so that may be a place where we can push a little harder, knowing that we have ally might be the wrong word, but we have
his ear anyway.
We have his ear. Thank you. That's the word I was going to say. And
I thought one of the most, educational points that he said in terms of consumer protection there was, if your agent, if your insurance is dropping you and they say it's because of the fire risk map, that's against the law, and you need to tell the Division of Financial Regulation, because they will go after that insurance company for that.
Big time.
So I don't think people realize that, because we've heard that, and
yes.
the state needs to be notified so that they can go and enforce that and say, no, you can't tell people that, and you can't be using these maps, which they're not.
And I didn't
It's
know
usually
that
just
until you
agents
mentioned it.
blaming
Yeah.
it on the map. It's actually not. They're not actually using it. They're just kind of using that as a scapegoat for some of the premium increases or dropping coverage.
Yeah, they can't drop you without written notice. They can't, they have to provide, and it can't be, and he said it can't be wildfire risk. Like it has to be very detailed, very
detailed
specific.
rationale.
Yeah.
You have a right to ask for it.
Yeah, so people aren't getting that. They have a right also to report that to the state.
I think in addition to the insurance concerns, there's also the concern about property values. And, you've got a potential buyer and then they see, oh, wait, this property's high risk wildfire. There's a lot of concerns of that going around as well.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe 3 letters, one to Senator Golden primarily, one to the Division of Financial Regulation, and maybe one if we can figure out the appeal process, if there's a direction through there.
And I think Matt did mention that he's been going around the state having discussions with community groups about this whole thing and what his job is and what his division does. And he talked about being willing to come and do something some night if we wanted to have a workshop or something like that, where he could actually provide, we're giving you snippets of what we talked about.
I've hooked him in with C4C is working on I think
Community.
a 2-part preparedness wildfire event in coordination with Rotary and Kiwanis, and I've already
Good.
connected him with him.
Thank you. I know we
So,
talked about that, so.
Yeah, and he said he would be happy to help.
I mean, you know how I feel about things. I love it when we take the lead and we, take that extra step. A lot of communities don't do anything like this. Nothing. So I love it.
And what's the name for that?
What's that?
Our style?
The Sisters Way, you mean? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just think it's great that we have this kind of community that we have these impassioned people that come to our meetings and talk to, about the trees and about, that's what makes this place special. The trees by themselves don't make it special because if there was nobody that lived here, the trees would be just fine, right? So it's the people that do it, so. I don't know what we do, again, I don't know what the process is gonna be, but I think we're on the right track here.
Okay. And, yeah, I'm good. Okay. And Cheryl, are you good with that?
Yes, I think it sounds good.
Okay, yeah, we'll work with Jordan, and staff and try to come up with, some drafts for everybody to see, so we can, support the community members on
Use
this.
the KISS method though, you know what I mean? 3, 4, 5 pages. We just need one good heavy hidden page.
Okay.
Simple Smarty.
Yeah, keep it simple, Smarty.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I know this is gonna make the meeting go long, but it was just such an important topic for everybody. We can kind of do round robin, if anything's pertinent, because we still have one short meeting after this to accomplish, so.
I'll be real quick. Just want to let you know, you've all seen, as Jordan mentioned, that the suggested names from the group are out there. They worked hard at it and they went through a lot of them. They went through a lot of iterations. Some were interesting, some were maybe more appropriate for the, like Giddy Up and Go. I suggested that might be good for the comfort station as opposed to the park. But they've given it a lot of thought and they understand that when it comes to us, we may wordsmith it a little bit, we may not. And so, but they're taking it very seriously. And I want to say that Rebecca's done an excellent job of trying to corral the horses and the wild cats all at the same time. Thank you.
Yeah, I watched part of that meeting too, but I was
Was it?
curious. Yeah.
Giddy
Fast
up and go.
forwarded some. Yeah.
Yep.
Comments?
Yeah, I've got a few. I attended the fire mitigation meeting last week and also with Mayor Letts and just I was curious and to see, what this group was like, and I understand that every meeting is different. I wanted to bring it up here just because I think it's an interesting place to go and I don't want to hog the meeting. So I don't know if other counselors are interested in like attending a meeting or two, checking it out. But I know that, we should only have 2 attend any given month, checking it out. So, but I'd be interested in going back other months just for learning purposes as opposed to anything official. So just wanted to bring that up here, see what people were about.
I'm a little brain dead, to be honest with you.
Oh, that's fine. And I mean, we can, more than 2 of us can be there. We just can't.
We just can't formulate policy.
Right, yeah.
And we shouldn't sit together.
Yeah, we can
Probably not.
separately, so.
Technically.
Always better safe than sorry in those type of meetings.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there's staff there. We're talking about things that council are working on.
Let's talk
Take that
offline.
back.
I'd love to hear more about it, but we don't need to do it right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Definitely.
that's a good, yeah.
Hey, I've had a fascinating 3 weeks here, so,
That's awesome.
share the love.
Yeah.
No, it's good.
I'll let you know that I did meet with a community member who has a concern with the STR code. I know you're excited to hear that. And that's around the condominium piece. And I'll be bringing a few things related to that and well, just a few things related to SDRs to the goal setting next week. So fast forward. And then I am getting up to speed with the houseless committees, had our first partner group, and I'm excited where we are there. It all happened before me, but there are some action items that are getting put together, which I think it's always nice to have a plan associated so you can see people who are not associated with the meetings can see what's happening and what types of actions are even possible to make the situation better. And then I was also onboarded on Monday to the Coordinated Houseless Response Office, and our first meeting is in 2 weeks, and I'll have a lot more to share, so hopefully we won't be late so you guys can listen for a while. Yeah, stay tuned.
Okay. Cheryl, do you have anything to share?
Yeah, real quick, I attended my first COIC meeting. And we reviewed some legislation supported by COIC, including the water bill for juniper removal, and funding for the Central Oregon Wildfire Workforce Partnership. COIC is working with the 3 county emergency managers on an application to the Oregon Department of Energy to support the development of an energy resilience plan for our area. Whew, tired. This work will kick off in February, and plans are expected to be completed in early fall. Also attended the Urban Forestry Board meeting. 3 new members, their first meeting. They had a full house, every seat taken for the board members. So it was great to have that activity. And they reviewed their first heritage tree application, submitted by Susan Cobb. I see you, Susan. Hi. They really took the time because it's a new process. Remember, this is the first time they're actually exercising this application process. So they really took the time to go through the code, understand it. Plus, you had 3 new members on the board trying to get up to speed. They made some decisions around that and the next steps. And that's all I have to keep it short.
Okay, thank you. Michael?
Had an Explore Sisters board meeting last week or the week before. They're coming to us pretty soon with a report and some figures. So Scott will be here before us, so I don't really have to talk much more about that. Things are chugging along there. The liaison to the Planning Commission, I think that's going to be really valuable. It's kind of nice just to be there. Not really, not interacting a lot, just kind of being there, but available. I think they like it. I think Scott kind of likes having me there a little bit. It was UGB this time, so what you saw tonight was what we saw. And we also saw it at the, like I said, the steering committee. So I've seen that 3 times in 3 weeks. But it's good because what it's done is I've seen different groups coalesce pretty much the same opinions. So, as a community, I think we're pretty close together. I would say there's a good majority in the middle, not either side, in the middle that see the value of what we're doing. So hopefully that continues. That may change it. I think we got some bumpy roads ahead still, but, the further you get in there, you get closer to the end, tensions get high. So that's just how it's going to be, I think, a little bit. Other than that, haven't had an EDCO meeting since the last city council meeting, but we'll have one soon. And then, of course, the annual luncheon is tomorrow. Who's going? Okay. Does anybody want to ride together? Just because I know we have parking issues there.
I have to go to COACT in Redmond right after, so
Okay.
I have to.
I gotta need an oil change.
Oh, you want me to drive and you can ride with me? I mean, I'm just looking to save space. I don't know. I mean, I gassed up today. I'm good. So,
All right, let's talk, yeah.
okay, we'll talk. Are you going? Oh, you already live down there, though, so. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
That's it. That's all I got.
Oh, great. And then, want to thank the community for attending our open house, for our goals session. It was a really great, a group of people, I think over 50 people, I think we had here. This room was at capacity for sure. A lot of great ideas and conversations going on there. So thanks to everybody for showing up for that. And we'll be setting our goals, next week, late next week. And, some of these meetings I also attended, so I won't double up, but, with the Central Oregon Cities Organization, attended a, Zoom meeting and an in-person meeting. I think, Michael was on those same calls as well. So, the State House is in full swing. Obviously, lots and lots and lots and lots of bills. They're trying to work through a lot of on housing. It's the hot topic for everybody across the state. No surprise there. But a lot of question marks and concerns over, federal dollars. I think one person said that about 30% of the state budget is federal dollars. And, so them trying to, among other things, look forward and see, if they need to be setting aside, at first they walked into the session with a bigger than normal budget, and now they're wondering if they're going to actually have to set aside a lot of money. to make up for losses in federal dollars. So they have their work cut out for them. And speaking to that, I know our representatives, Representative Levy and Senator Broadman, are having a town hall here on Saturday, February 22nd, starting at 10:30. That's here, or is it? It's at the library, that's what I thought. Okay, at the library next door. If people want to learn more about what's going on at the state. And
Sometimes we just need someone to yell at.
yeah, or just speak firmly. I think they appreciate
Firmly,
that.
yeah.
And then, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting, and then we will start the URA meeting.
Anybody need a
in
break?
about, yeah, 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Oh, no. Next item.
Gonna be quick.
Okay, all right,
There you go.
okay. I call to order the February 12th, 2025 URA meeting. Roll call.
Board Chair Litz,
Here.
Board Member, sorry, Board Member Frieden,
Yeah, I'm here.
Board Member Pellerin,
Here.
Board Member McDougal,
Here.
Board Member Ross.
I am present.
All right, thank you. Is there any visitor communication? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent
A
agenda.
second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, one matter of business is professional services agreement for the Locust Roundabout landscape design. Paul Bertagna will walk us through this quickly.
Thanks for sticking around, Paul.
So this is a professional services agreement with Cameron McCarthy for the design of the Locust Street roundabout landscaping, as well as the artist collaboration that'll go along with that, with the center art piece. And this takes us all the way through construction. So it includes contract admin, includes submittal review, and then final walkthrough and as-bills. So it's a full package deal. We put out a RFP to our qualified consultant list. We got 2 proposals. They were reviewed and scored by city staff and a person from SPRD, since they're going to be fairly affected. And it was unanimous that Cameron McCarthy was the winner in that process. So I put a couple bullet points on schedule. My laptop died, so I think they're going to have initial design concept in May. They're going to be working with adjacent property owners. So we've got 5 of them, school district. We got High Camp, we have the gas station, and we have Oliver Lemon's property, and then SPRD as well. And they'll be working with them on initial design concept to make sure that we're not, going to block signs and views of access points, create any safety concerns. And then they'll come back, they'll work with staff to develop the full design, and then go back and show it to them, get final thoughts on that, and then obviously bring it to you all for approval. If there's any questions?
Just one quick one. That's sign that blocks the crosswalk down to the roundabout coming in from the south.
From the east?
Thank you.
Yep. It's a temporary sign.
Yeah.
I think they're waiting
Can it
for
be
their,
moved? Can it be moved a few feet?
it's, yeah, I mean, I talked to ODOT about it, but
Yeah, it literally does hide anybody trying to cross the street at that crosswalk.
it does. It does. I'm not sure why they got it there.
I mean,
Could
I
be-
didn't, it's not a big deal, but I was wondering that's probably gonna stay around until this work is done and something permanent gets placed. Is that correct?
No,
No.
no. So they got those signs ordered. Is when they come in, they'll change them out to
All right,
permanent.
great. That's all I need to know.
Yeah.
In case it comes up again. Thank
You
you.
bet. Horrible placement of it. I agree. Yeah.
Try to keep this away.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, with that, I ask for a motion.
I move to approve a professional services agreement with Cameron McCarthy Landscape Architects and Planning LLP for the Locust Roundabout landscape design in an amount not to exceed $54,361 and authorize the agency manager to execute the contract.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay.
Great,
It is so
thank you.
moved. Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
sticking
you.
around.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And with that, I adjourn the URA meeting.
We went so long that Paul's laptop battery died.
That's saying.